the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Notice of this meeting was given in accordance with the provisions of bylaw 0164B of the Riverside Local Board of Education, which was adopted in accordance with section 1.450 of the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Administrative Procedures Act. Gary, can you call the roll?
Scott Fishel.
Here.
Dennis Keeney.
Here.
Denise Brewster.
Here.
Linda Grassi.
Here.
Lori Korniski.
Here.
Now let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we proceed with tonight's agenda, on behalf of the local school district, Board of Education, and district administration, I ask that we take a moment to honor the memory of a 7th grade student, Addie Monk, who tragically passed away earlier this week after battling a long-term illness. Our heartfelt condolences and deepest sympathy go out to the student's family and friends during this extremely difficult time. In recognition of her life and the impact she had on all who knew her, I ask that we observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Welcome. On behalf of the board, I would like to welcome all students, staff, parents, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. I would like to remind everyone that this is a meeting of the Board of Education held in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public comment during the meeting in the public participation section of the agenda. The approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the minutes as attached for December 19th, 2024 board minutes, January 8th tax budget hearing, January 8th organizational meeting, and January 8th special meeting minutes. Can I get a second?
So moved.
Any discussion, questions? Hearing none. Can you take the roll?
Scott Fishel.
Aye.
Dennis Keeney.
Aye.
Denise Brewster.
Aye.
Linda Grassi.
Aye.
Lori Korniski.
Aye.
Motion carried. Special reports.
Yes, I have two tonight that are rather quick. The first is you have Mr. St. Clair and Mrs. Weber to talk about Parkside Elementary and the great things that are happening there. So I will pass the clicker on to them. Down by
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you. Okay. So we just wanted to talk about a few things that's going on at Parkside. There's a lot of district initiatives getting started, up and running this year. So we're going to kind of weave some of the things that we're doing at Parkside into those initiatives that are happening throughout the district. So the first thing I wanted to talk about tonight was something that we are doing school-wide beginning in March. We all know that March Madness is a fun thing to watch on television, but we are kind of now applying it to reading and our love of books. So we create a Sweet 16 bracket and have like books up against each other and play games, kind of one book against the other. We are changing it up a little bit this year, so we are pairing books and creating categories. So we have a category of biography, and we have a category of community, we have a category of poetry, and then different books within those categories that students will be reading throughout the month of March. So we'll see who ends up winning the tournament of books. The next thing I wanted to talk about was a connection that we're doing, implementing at Parkside with PBIS, as that is one of the things that we're kind of focusing on as a district as well. So you can see the picture there. We try to tie our monthly focus into the portrait of a beaver and the characteristics that are highlighted in the portrait of a beaver. We have some literature available, books available that teachers bring to the classrooms to kind of highlight some of those characteristics that are on the portrait of a beaver. And then we also recognize positive behaviors through our Student of the Month program. All right, something else that is new this year at the elementary level, K-2, recently adopted a new reading curriculum, Wit and Wisdom. So we can just see some of the things that first and second grade kind of brought their Wit and Wisdom modules to life. Second grade, their second module of the American West, they kind of turned their whole pod into the American West. And some of the things that were in there really intrigued the students, but also connected directly to what they were reading and learning about through their modules. For first grade, their first module was the world of books. So the first grade teachers made a connection with Morley Library, and they had a family night at Morley Library where families went in. They could sign up for library cards, but they also had story time and all of those types of things. And then last year, we had 2 seniors from Riverside do their senior project at Parkside, and they created a little library. So we tied that to the world of books as well, and first graders kind of take care of that little library, making sure that we have good selection. All right. And then some of the other updates that we are doing within our library is we wanted to make it a space where we could not only check out books, but explore other avenues. So we started connecting books to some more exploratory activities or stations that kids could do when they visit the library. So one of them is a drawing station, and we have like how-to books there, and then also some materials where kids can explore and draw. One of them was down at the bottom, we have, for winter, we had like a snowflake snow station, so they could learn about snowflakes, the symmetry, the fact that they are hexagons, and then use pattern blocks to create a snowflake. And then we also have a puzzle that kind of lives and builds itself throughout the week as different classes visit the library. So it's always fun when kids come back in and they see how far the puzzle was from the last time they visited. And then just something that we did with our bus drivers as well. We took the book, A Boy Watching, which is about a boy's journey to and from school and what he notices on the way. And all of our bus drivers at Parkside read it, and then they wrote a letter to the students that's in the front of the book, and that's also in the library.
Okay. In third grade, one of the things that we work on is goal setting and growth mindset with our third graders. Our third grade teachers do a great job with that. During this past January, when we were mapping, students created their goals. Some of the quotes, they created the mapping, climbing the mountain, monitoring their progress to see their growth was one of the little captions on one of the smaller mountains. Learning from my mistakes, because we do learn more when we make a mistake and grow from that mistake, as well as persevering to do difficult tasks, because the map assessment that we take can be a little daunting for kids. It's a pretty rigorous, lengthy test, and so we like for them to persevere, which we think helps prepare them as they get ready to take the OSTs, but it also just helps them build that academic stamina. Also in third grade this year, each of the math teachers, Mrs. Yarshin and Mrs. Wood, have data binders for each student where they monitor their progress, not only for math, but also on their quizzes and as they progress through the curriculum. So it's nice to see kids making targets, and that also ties into the personalized learning that we're working on, because they can learn and do things that interest them, but then also work on things that they maybe are struggling with a little bit to boost their academics. In fourth grade, we have two new things happening this year. Mrs. Kleinknecht and Mrs. Javorek have teamed up to team teach together. So their classes are in the adjoining classrooms in fourth grade upstairs. And so they open the doors, and kids will come into the language arts class and math class, as well as science and social studies. But they are both in there along with the intervention specialist, Mrs. Byram, and they receive their mini lesson and core lesson during that time, that large group time. And then they break off into smaller groups within the other two rooms. So had to switch some rooms when we came back from winter break. They pulled some resources from different areas of the building and were able to create that. And the response that we've gotten from the kids, because it's been a difference for them, they really enjoy being in the room with all of their teachers. They feel the teachers can ask them questions and work with them when they go off into the other classroom. So it's a nice setup in the fourth grade class. When you walk in, it's not a traditional classroom like this. We've taken some furniture from the library. We have some taller seats so everybody can kind of see over. So it's almost like an arena style, something you might see more at the high school or collegiate level. So it's a very warm, inviting space, and they do a very nice job working with all of the students. Another enrichment project that's going on right now in Mrs. Reeney's fourth grade math class. Students partnered together to create games and then written narrations in an integrated language arts and math project called Math Marvels Adventure Quest, and I put a link in there, so if you want to take a look at it, you can. But it's very interesting because the kids create a game, and you can see the 3 different game boards there. There's about 7 game boards in total in the fourth grade, and the kids have to create the game, but then also solve the problems along the way, so as other students are playing the game. And they did it in pairs of 2 and 3, so it was nice for them to be able to develop it. There was one story that's written alongside it, and it's just a wonderful, creative way to join both language arts and math, and the kids are really excited about it. So they'll be playing those games and solving the problems and equations along the way. So kudos to Mrs. Reeney for integrating math and language arts, which usually doesn't happen. Usually it's math and science. But the kids were responsible for creating their own projects, titles, and there's a lot of difference there, which is also more personalized for the kids. Then in fifth grade, this is math up in Mrs. Kiefer and Mrs. Matega's classrooms. They do this is daily. They go around the room, there's different problems at the board, and they go around the room and solve the problems together. There's 3 to 4 students in a group, mostly 3 or 4. And they go around, they must explain how they solve it, and then they present, because there's always more than one way to solve a problem. And so the students can come up with a variety of ways to solve the problem, which is great because it also hits on some of that personalized learning piece, but it also gets them collaborating. And another thing they do is share the pencil. So if I have a group of 3, I'm doing work, then I have to pass the pencil. Someone else has to pick it up and go from there. So you can't just stand in the background. I would have been the kid that stood in the background and let everybody else solve the problem for me. These kids all have to contribute and produce. So it's nice to see that they're working collaboratively and then presenting, as a group, so they can share how they've solved the problems. And it's a lot of good discussion, when you walk into the room and you hear them talking about, well, what about this and what about that? And sometimes they get stuck and then they have to, get unstuck. And that's really good when that happens in the classroom, because they are using the skills that they've been taught to try and solve a new problem. And that concludes our report from Parkside Elementary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my second one is January is Board Appreciation Month, and we just want to say thank you. It is not easy to be a board member, and I definitely understand that. And thank you for all the dedication and time you put into the Riverside schools, all of their families and students. On your seats were bags that were made by our business class. They did get moved around since you changed the original placement, but they were created by our business class here at the campus. Inside of that bag is a certificate with the name of the bag recipient that says Super Board Superhero from OSBA, as well as a tumbler that is engraved with "One community pursuing greatness, getting better every day" for Riverside School. So a small token of our appreciation for all of the work you do, and your hard work and community is not going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Gentlemen,
much.
you were supposed to get the black ones, and ladies, you were supposed to get the gray ones, just an FYI. I don't know if seats got switched, but just so you know.
They did get switched around.
Oh,
We'll get
yeah.
them squared away at the end of the
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, so just switch them around,
Pick on
but
the correct one.
we just did different because we thought the
The
black
guys
looked
get
a
the
little-
plain things and the girls get the nice things.
Well, I wouldn't say nice, it just looked a little bit, it looks a little girly.
And thank you.
And our students were really excited to put them together, to
It was
design
so
it,
fun.
Yeah, it's
to
very
come
nice.
down and use both the screen press and the embroider. So it was really neat, a real world activity that was done in our high school.
That's great, thank you.
Excellent.
And that concludes my reports.
Well, thank you for that. Next, we have discussion of old business. Any old business?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if it belongs under old or new business, but I did want to bring to the table, from the last board communication, there were a couple things in there that were not discussed at the board table during the last meeting. The first one was, bear with me one second. The communication mentioned an estimated cost for the Buckeye and Melridge projects, which were never discussed by the board. So the first part of that is, first, there was no work discussed by the board of what we're going to do at Melridge. So I just wanted to make sure we as a board are having that discussion here at the table. Because again, that did not happen. I went back and watched the meeting just to make sure I was paying attention, and I did not hear anything. So I'm not sure, Mr. Official, what that refers to.
Well, thank you for that. Do you want to discuss that here?
Yeah.
Okay, so at Melridge, obviously it's an older building and has some needs. And so part of the thinking in developing the project for Buckeye is to include Melridge. And the thinking is that whatever work we can do over there would be helpful. And there's been some thought and discussion about possibly doing air conditioning and maybe lighting. And so that has to be developed. And as we move along into the Buckeye project, Melridge will be included as much as possible. So while there aren't exact figures yet, that has to be vetted out a little bit and even investigated a little bit for the more the information gathering process will continue to move on, but that's what we're looking at possibly
Can I ask
for
who
Melridge.
we are?
Yeah, who had that discussion?
So we talked about it a little bit. Mr. Keeney and I have discussed what the possibilities are, you know, looking at the buildings and grounds. And so there's been some discussion as to what possibly might be done, but we have to gather information. So we're in the information gathering process.
So-
When the information is gathered, then of course we'll bring it to buildings and grounds and have board discussion.
So real quick, again, I'm not opposed to sending a board communication, but the board communication is supposed to reflect what is going on here at the board table. None of us were included in that conversation, but yet it went out in the board communication, along with a dollar figure that I'm not sure where that came from. So where did the $12 million come
So
from?
that's an estimated cost.
Where did
and
we get
again,
it from?
Well, it's just an estimated cost by looking at approximately $450 to $500 a square foot when you're building an addition, and when you're looking at 12 to 13 classrooms, approximately 1,000 square feet on average per, plus a gymnasium, which would cost approximately $2 million. And then looking at some other work inside of Buckeye and possibly Melridge, it's an estimated, guesstimated cost right now, and we're in the information gathering process, so there isn't much to put forward to really discuss until we can gather some more information. But there is an estimated amount, and in talking with our owner's rep and with TDA, who have been hired for that project, they're offering some information that comes in around that number.
Was there a discussion about Melridge at the Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting? Because that wasn't in our update, I don't think, at the last board meeting.
You know, I don't remember if we actually talked about it in Buildings and Grounds. Again, we're in the information gathering process, and so to bring something forward, you know, we want to have some numbers that we can actually talk about. Right now, it's an estimate, and we have to gather some more information. Now, we are in the information gathering process, but it's probably going to take a little bit while longer. Mr. Keeney, do you have any idea of how long it'll take to gather that information?
Well, for instance, we just did a walkthrough at Buckeye the other day with Cleveland Construction and the architect and our maintenance director, just getting an idea of what the physical layout of the existing building is and what it would take to bring that up to speed. At that point, all they have to go on is, we've seen the building, we'll play around with a couple of different options, what we can do to upgrade the heating and air conditioning system, what we can do with other things, but right now they're in the thought gathering process also and trying to put together some things. So with some of that information that we gather there, we'll also be able to apply to Melridge. But our owner's rep was ill and not able to make that meeting, but I'm going to meet with him, we haven't set a date yet, to go through Buckeye and Melridge to get a better understanding of really what's in front of us. And it's not going to be a real easy task in many cases, just due to the nature of availability of parts for existing systems. And so you may be looking at a major overhaul of some of those. And so that's where you tread lightly until you have much more firm information to work
So
with.
can I just interject? We put out a letter that indicated to the public that we talked about Melridge, and it included Melridge in this letter, but we didn't discuss Melridge at the Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting. We didn't get an update at the board meeting, and we didn't talk about Melridge at the board table. So I don't know that that information should be going out to the public yet. We haven't vetted it yet. I mean, if that's conversation that's happening at the Buildings and Grounds Committee, that's great, but it should be discussed here, like through your updates, before we're putting that out to the community that we're doing something with Melridge, because we haven't decided that yet.
I think in a lot of our, meetings that we had with the public in the past, that Buckeye and Melridge were priorities.
But again, the communication going out should represent what's happening here if it's coming from the entire board. If you're having conversations and we're not privy to that, that's not information that should be coming from the entire board, along with the costs. So again, my concern with the communication is that it should be transparent, collaborative, and truthful. And already in this past one, we could go back to the prior one, there's information that was not discussed at this board table, that all board members are not aware of, things that are going on, but yet it's being communicated to the district as part of what the board is doing, and that's not true. We haven't had a single discussion about what we think we need as a board. I don't know, has the administration been brought in to talk about Melridge or Buckeye?
We have talked about Buckeye. Actually, Buckeye was in the facilities plan.
Right.
The mention of Melridge was also in the facilities plan as well, as updates as appropriate. So they have been discussed within both phase one, or what do you call it, phase, because phase is a bad word, segment one and segment two. So we have had some preliminary discussions and put those in that Buckeye should be the next priority along the way.
But have you guys had discussions of what we're looking to do at Buckeye and Melridge?
So Buckeye for sure, absolutely.
Okay. What about Melridge?
Melridge, no.
Okay. So again,
Well, we had, when we met, we had
We said-
some discussions about what could be done.
Yes.
So discussions about what could be done throughout the whole district have been going on. And so the information that goes out to the public is going to be continually updated and revised as we have clearer direction and numbers. So yes, all of that information will go out. Now, we have a meeting that is set for Monday, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and we are going to, who is going to be at that meeting?
That is it's a Buildings and Grounds meeting, so I believe both the Buildings and Grounds Committee will be there, as well as our owner's rep, the vice president of Cleveland Construction, and probably as well as their crew, and the architect, Mrs. Smolin, Mrs. Chantry is appropriate. So we're talking about both Riverview and Buckeye.
Right, and that will be a noticed meeting, right?
That notice, did it go out today? That
did.
notice went out, so it
Right.
is a notice filmed, posted, all
Right,
that.
and so at that meeting, we will continue to have the discussion, and this is well, it started at the ground floor many months ago, and we have been discussing it as we go. And so as we give information to the public, we will be giving it to them and updating them as we go, and even revising numbers as we get better numbers from both Cleveland Construction and our architect and our owner's rep. And also, as we develop and we go to borrow some money, of course, all of that information will be identified as it's refined. Now, informing the public about what we're doing in general, are you objecting to anything being given to the public if it's not actually discussed at this table?
It should be discussed at this table.
Yeah,
So the meetings,
I'm
yes.
asking you, are you objecting to anything being given to the public unless it's discussed at this
If
table?
it's not vetted here at the table, it should not be going out as part of a board
Okay,
communication.
so, and so when we discuss something in buildings and grounds and it's not brought up here, you do not want that
Right,
information
because
given
the
to the
entire board
public?
does not have knowledge
I'm
of
just
it.
asking you that
And
question.
I said, yes, the entire board does not
Okay.
have knowledge.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for that, and that will be noted.
I think the committees are having discussions, but the committees aren't making decisions. The board is supposed to make the decision, and so I just think that's part of the issue.
Yeah, so now we're talking about the board makes decision, the board does business. And you're talking about the board making decisions on every piece of communication that goes to the public?
No, I'm asking that we're making decisions based on what we're gonna do with our facilities, and if we haven't had any conversation or decision about Melridge, then it shouldn't be going out in a communication piece.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. So the board does business, right? The board votes on what the business is going to do. Along the way, involved in that business are a multitude of conversations and actions and discussions and information gathering pieces. So if what you're saying is you don't want the public to know any of that until we discuss it at the table, then I'll take note of that. And I think the public should have more information rather than less information, but if you want them to have only the information that we discuss here at the table, I'll note that.
I would like to make sure that if we're going to discuss it in committees, and we're gonna do a committee report, and that's where we then can discuss it at the table, and then it can go out in a piece of communication, but we didn't do that for Melridge, so.
Right, and so I'm hearing you and appreciate that. I'm also adding that if there is something discussed in committees and someone doesn't bring it up at the board table, you're saying you do not want that information disseminated to the public.
How would I be able to answer somebody in the public if they ask me about that if I've never heard of it?
Well, that's a very good question.
Yeah, that is a
So
very good question.
if someone asks you that question, then you might ask someone that's in the Buildings and Grounds Committee and you can get back to them. But again, I'm asking, do you not want the public to be privy to any
Mr. Fischel,
information unless it's discussed here at the
Again,
table?
the communication going out to the district on behalf of the Board of Education, we should all have knowledge about what it is. You having a discussion with TDA, Cleveland Construction, whoever it is, a bus, whatever, undercoating place, we don't know about that. It should not be going out to the district. It should be discussed here, and everybody should be able to have that information.
Okay, so you said the undercoating place, what do you mean by that?
We'll move on, because again, I don't think you're willing to really listen and hear what we're saying. You're gonna do it your way anyways, but again, we've said that the communication should reflect what the entire board knows, not what you have talked about.
And so I'm taking note of that. And so
Thank
again,
you.
I'm asking, do you not want the public to be aware of anything
That's
unless it's
not what we're
discussed?
saying. That is
here
not
at
what
the
we are
table?
saying. What we're
That's what I'm
saying
hearing
is,
you
no,
say.
it's not. It's saying, bring it to the table first, so
Yeah,
that we
that's what
all
I
have
said.
knowledge. No, you didn't. You're trying to get me to say that I don't want the public to be aware of what's going on, and that's not what I'm saying.
Oh, no.
Yes, you are. That's the way you're
No, no,
phrasing
I'm
it.
not saying that.
So
What I'm
again, we
saying,
would like it to be reflective of what's discussed here at the board table. I'm not gonna go any further.
okay, So I'm taking note of that, and
Note.
I believe that the public has a right to know all of the information as much as possible, even things that are not discussed at the table.
Okay, I wanted to say that, you know, obviously, we have our committees, and only 2 board members are at a committee, but each of these committee meetings is now videotaped or, you know, recorded by Nick. And so if I wanted to know more about what's going on at the board, or let's say Buildings and Grounds, or some other committee, finance or personnel, you know, I could watch that. But, you know, technically I can't attend the meeting because I would be the 3rd person and cause that to be an official board meeting, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
So, and I think when we have these committee meetings, yes, we give a report. We kind of highlight, you know, like, for example, what went on in Curriculum Programs Committee. But we don't discuss every single detail here at the table. We try to, but I do know that Dr. Rotino did spend a lot of time on the facility plan. I was part of that committee. We had the meetings at Buckeye and Melridge, heard from parents and other people there about what their concerns were, and we did vote on the facility plan. So I think that, you know, we have talked about it, but as far as minute detail, I don't think you're gonna get that unless
So
you
as-
sit
Well,
and
Yes.
listen.
I believe that we talked about, we voted on Riverside, or Riverview, expansion at Riverview. We actually voted on an expansion at Buckeye. We didn't vote on anything specifically for Melridge yet. If that's being discussed at Buildings and Grounds and we need to vote on something, I would like that to be discussed at the table before it goes out to the public.
Okay,
And as Mrs. Grassi had pointed out, the 2 things that are on here were not even discussed at Buildings and Grounds, I don't believe. So even if we watch
Yeah.
it, it wasn't discussed.
okay. Well, I'm not sure where the information came from.
Me neither.
Me neither.
So, thank you for the input. Is there anything else for old business? Okay, new business, do you have anything?
So I did have one thing for new business. I don't know whether or not this board has had any conversation, or if we should have some conversation about some advocacy that we should probably consider doing in light of the budget process that's going to be going on in the state shortly. You know, there's the fair school funding and the vouchers for Ohio lawsuit that's being driven, and member school districts are participating in advocacy on that. I don't know if that's something that this board feels the need that we should be doing, but I feel that we should be doing at least some advocacy about the fair school funding plan in light of the budget season that's coming up with the state. And I just want to bring that to the board's attention. I want to make sure that we are doing all that we can to make sure that we get our fair share of funding. There's a lot of talk about how folks down in Columbus don't want to move forward with the last 2 years of the funding of that plan.
I think it'll be interesting too, I was just reading an article about if there are federal budget cuts too, that there'll be 30% possible reduction in state funding. So I think we'll have to keep an eye on a few things, not only that, but how that could impact us.
And what would you propose to do in an advocacy action?
I would think that at any opportunity that we have to provide testimony or to provide written testimony throughout the budget process, that we initiate some conversation as a group with our treasurer and make sure that that happens. You know, the fact that,
We can't-
the fact that the fair school funding plan could be not implemented in full, to me, is problematic. I don't know, Mr. Placco, if you agree with that statement.
Yeah, it's, you know, the fair school funding plan was many years in the making, even before it was introduced. And to be quite honest, I remember going to a meeting, I think it was the Summit County ESC, they had a bunch of treasurers and superintendents across Northeast Ohio, and they were presenting this plan that was developed by people who work in public schools. And when it was first introduced, I think a lot of us were like, there's no way this is gonna go in. You know, you look at the last 25 years of state budgets and school funding and how many lawsuits and unconstitutionality, the DeRolf cases, things like that, over the years, we still have not gotten to a formula that hits all those constitutional items, make sure it's appropriate. We finally have that, but it's a 6-year phase, and obviously one General Assembly cannot tie the hands of the next General Assembly, but now here we are, we've made it 2/3 of the way through, we have 4 years in, there's 2 years left to phase in, and now you have, the Speaker of the House saying they don't think the third phase is gonna happen, and even had said publicly that it's fantasy for it to go all the way through, which is not a good sign when they're in charge of the House. So there's some concern there. With the fair school funding plan, it was hopeful that, vouchers and community schools don't flow through the district's books anymore like they did in the past. So in the past, we get revenue, but we got it at a reduced amount, and then we had expenditures that were hitting our funding that really weren't ours, and overinflated our expenditures, and they would take away more money for community schools than we were being funded for those students. So that was one of the really good changes of the fair school funding plan. One of the other issues was with the inclusion of income levels, it pushed us down to being at the floor of the funding, so it's not a guarantee right now. So, but with those charter school funding things coming out of us, no longer running through us, and also with increase in like some of the other funding for like transportation and things like that, it did help us, our financial picture, but not continuing that formula would be a detriment to not only us, but many districts, but especially other districts that rely a lot more on state funding. It's a much more bigger deal for them. For us, we can take a hit. We don't ever want to take a hit, but for us, because we're considered wealthy by the state, a reduction wouldn't be as impactful as opposed to like a Painesville City who's heavily state funded. But at the same time, you never want to see a decrease, and they are talking potentially decreasing funding to public schools, which is obviously a concern. The governor was supposed to release his budget, I think, on Monday, from what I've been hearing, and so that will kind of start the process to see how things will progress going forward.
I would just like to make sure that we, as individual board members, as an administrative team, and anybody from the public who wants to be involved in that advocacy process, that we can do that as a group, we can do that as individuals, we can do that, we can direct you as an administration to be participating in those conversations. And I feel like the louder and more voices we can have, the more successful that process will be for public schools.
Our own Jamie Callender, one of our representatives here that lives in Concord, he was one of the 2 individuals that introduced the fair school funding plan, so I would hope that he would want to see that follow through.
And he's also on the finance committee, right? I believe he is. And so, Representative Callender, I think, has a little bit of an overweighted say in the House. I think this is his last term. He's termed out, I believe. If you want to have some discussions with Representative Callender, you might want to express some of those concerns to him. And the Ohio Supreme Court still has ruled, the last ruling was that the school financing is unconstitutional, right?
Right.
So we're not in a place where we can rely on anything at this point. We have been told by the state that our funding may change, right? It may be reduced. We don't know when that's going to happen. They don't know when it's going to happen. So talking with people might be helpful, but I'm not so sure the legislature knows what they're doing, and the Supreme Court hasn't accepted anything that they've done. So I would suggest if you want to talk with them, go ahead and talk with them. I don't know the value of the board getting involved since there's so many moving parts and it's unconstitutional right now. I don't know much that can be done until they actually make some legislation that is constitutional. I mean, that's what we're waiting for, right?
The fair school funding plan is supposed to be that, but because they haven't phased it fully in yet, it's really not being funded yet. So this final phase should satisfy those requirements based on how it was designed. But if we don't get there,
And they're not telling us when that's going to be, right? We're just waiting to be notified, right?
we'll know June
Monday.
30th. Pretty much that's when the state plans to do.
Yeah.
We'll know
So-
something Monday.
Right. Well,
We'll
yeah,
know
we'll learn
what
more
direction
Monday, right?
The governor recommends, and it goes to the House. Then it goes to the Senate after the House does their work. then they're never the same, so then it goes to the conference committee, which is behind closed doors, and then they come out with, here's the final budget, but that's when things can change drastically in that conference committee, and you don't see it until the last minute, before they vote on it.
So we'll learn more Monday, and
I would just like all of us to keep apprised of what's coming out via the emails from OSBA on the legislation and the budget, and be paying attention and publicizing that at board meetings. This is what's happening.
I'll provide updates as we get
That'd be
them.
helpful.
Thank you.
They typically put out projections too, so
Right.
you can kind of see how it affects the school districts.
That's all I have.
thank you for that. So under new business, we're going to create a new committee, and it's going to be called the Insurance Review Committee. The board member involved with that will be Dennis Keeney, and we have a person in our community, Mr. Bill Robertson, who's here with us tonight, and that will be looking at insurance costs and benefits costs, and because of the increases, what is the increase this year,
It was 22% this year.
and the dollar amount?
I think it was like 1.6 million or something like that.
So we had a $1.6 million increase, and so creating a committee to work with the administration to look at that and see what the options are. Mr. Robertson has a wealth of knowledge and decades of experience in this arena, and he's willing to offer his time at no cost, and we're welcoming that, so
Can
that
I ask
committee can
a
move
question?
forward.
Can I ask a question on
Sure.
that? So if we're going to appoint somebody to a committee, I feel like we should appoint somebody from the board on that committee that actually understands that information with large depth and breadth of experience. That's my world, so I'm not exactly, I'm not deflecting, I'm just asking a question. Why are we appointing somebody, Mr. Keeney, to that when?
Well, I would think sometimes a fresh face is good.
It's just
So
interesting.
we've had opportunities in the past to have committees and work on items, and I've been on the board for 3 years, and we've not had any committees do that. I
So
think it's
should-
important with a $1.6 million increase in cost to the school district that we look at every opportunity to see if we can improve that, maybe save some money. I think that people getting involved and being led by a community member that has decades of experience in that arena. Probably Mr. Robertson knows more than anyone in Lake County about this topic.
So should we
Yeah.
appoint 2 board members and make it a committee?
No, this is a special committee as
Oh, boy.
appointed by the president. So,
So again, I just want to make sure I understand. So Belinda, who has experience, this is her world, she knows how it works, she understands it. Not qualified, but a fresh face will bring new perspective is what the qualifications are.
I didn't say that's what the
Well,
qualifications
that's what
are.
Mr. Keeney said his qualifications were.
Okay, so what I'm saying is I'm creating a committee.
I get that.
Right, and I've created a committee as a president can do.
I get that. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I
Okay.
just want to make sure we understand we have a board member that has experience, a wealth of knowledge, and we're saying, no, we're going to go with the fresh face to make sure that this committee works. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that's clear.
And are you clear on that?
Yep.
It
Thank
sounds
you.
like you're clear on that, so thank you for your input. Okay, creating another committee, and that committee is going to be the Buckeye Committee, and the board member involved will be Ms. Brewster, and the other person involved in that committee is going to be Principal Cassie Smolin. And as we have this Buckeye Edition project moving forward, we are looking to have the input of our principal and also Ms. Brewster, who has 42 years of experience. I think they will work well together since they both have been elementary school principals. And so would you want to do that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
And I spoke with Ms. Smolin yesterday, and she says she has an interest in doing that, and especially as the project moves forward, it'll help make sure that she gets everything she needs as the project moves forward. So that will be the Buckeye Committee. And Those committees, of course, can report to the board. And other committees, we have formal committees with 2 board members. These 2 committees are special committees with 1 board member each. Recently, I was elected as president of the school board, and when that happened, I went ahead and reread through the policies and bylaws. And it takes hours to do that, but I think it's worth doing. And there's a bylaw, there's a policy 7100, facilities planning. And part of that reads, in order to assure that future district improvements supports the educational program and responds to community needs, the board will prepare a capital improvement plan and will revise that plan periodically thereafter. Then it goes on further to say, in order to apprise the board of the continuing relevance of the board's capital improvement plan, also known as 5-year facilities plan, the superintendent shall report to the board upon request the number of resident students attending private schools by grades and the number of new residential units approved. Report to the board on the enrollment by grades during the school year annually. Conduct a kindergarten roundup each spring of the number of students who will be enrolled in the schools of the district in September of the year in which the estimate is made, and report the results to the board. And prepare student population projections every year and compare the actual population figures to the previously projected figures to detect early, for the benefits of the board, any changes in population trends. In planning for the enlargement or modification of its facilities, the board shall consider not only the number of children whose educational needs must be met, but also the physical requirements of the program it deems best suited to meet those needs. And so I wanted to point out that what this policy says is that the board will prepare a capital improvement plan, or the 5-year facilities plan. And Superintendent Rotino, you were tasked to do that with an 8-month template. It took about 10 months, and you were tasked with that. And this policy says it's the task of the board. And so the board will correct that, and the board will come up with a capital improvement plan. And now most of the work's been done, right? Because obviously a lot of time and effort went in, and we're moving forward on a Riverview project, we're moving forward on a Buckeye project, and so a lot of that's been done. So the board will relook at it, maybe make a revision or 2, and that work will be completed within a couple more months, and then the board can vote on that. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that that is policy 7100.
Who will be taking on that revision?
The board will.
And when are we going to do that?
That's not planned yet. Is there any other new business?
Do you have a timeline on that?
It's going to be done within 2 months. It will be completed.
Do we have meetings set up for that?
I just said there's nothing in the plans.
Can we
just
get
yet.
those in place? Because it's tax season and I have commitments.
Okay, so
Can we
let's
put some
set,
meetings in place?
let's set a work session for February 12th or 13th. Do either of those dates work for you, Ms. Grassi?
The 13th does not, unless we're going to do it in the morning.
This would be an evening meeting.
I am speaking at Hope Ridge Church.
You're
that
saying at
night.
The 13th?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm on the 12th, I'm sorry.
On the 12th.
Yes,
And what time are you speaking?
That is at 7 o'clock.
If we had a meeting at 5:30 or 6 as a preliminary opening meeting and got you out of here by,
I just need to be there, I just need to be there
6:30.
set up, and, I mean, I made the arrangements a while ago. They asked for an update on the school district.
okay, and that's the 12th.
That is the 12th. It's-
Okay, so are you available, Ms. Grassi, on the 12th?
At this time, yes?
Ms. Krasinski?
Nope.
And what about February 10th? Monday, February 10th?
I'm possibly gonna be out of town that week, so I am not available.
You're out all week?
I am possibly with my job, yes.
Okay, so your job prevents you from attending that whole week?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so if we had a work session on let's say February 18th. Ms. Grassi, would that work for you?
I have to check 2 calendars, so give me a second.
You're not available
Yeah,
the 18th?
I'm not, but I could do the 19th.
How about the 19th? Wednesday, the 19th?
Or we can let the policy committee do it, we just got some new policy. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to work on policy. Make it much easier.
Yeah, so it's going to be a board, not a policy item, so
But
are
it is a
you-
policy, so
are-
the policy committee take that
So the
on.
board is, I'm president, and the board's going to handle this.
Are
Okay,
we-
it's
are we
not a
looking at-
policy item.
Are we looking at policy, or are we looking at revising the
We are
facility
looking
plan?
at executing the policy. We're not looking at changing the policy.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. Are we looking at taking on revision of the facility plan? Is that what the work session is?
The work session's going to be to review the capital plan, also known as the 5-year facilities plan, and to look at any possible revisions, and then, once that's completed, vote on it, of course.
And how long is this meeting going to be? I mean, we're planning on doing that in a short and brief work session? Just
So,
asking. I'm
so
trying to figure
are
out what to
you-
expect here.
are you suggesting that it needs to be more than an hour?
I don't know, I would
Okay.
imagine.
So I am
I mean, it took
suggesting,
8 months to formulate the plan. I think it would take more than an hour to determine how we're going to change it, when that's not what the community asked us to do, so. Yeah, I would think it would take more than an hour to have conversation, an in-depth and thorough conversation.
okay, so a lot of the work has already been done, and there will be some changes, so it's not an 8-month program, okay? So we, I believe, as a board, can utilize our time very effectively and efficiently and get this work done. Will it take a meeting? Will it take 2 meetings? Will it take 3? We will find out. So I'm expecting that we will have a meeting. It'll be approximately an hour. And if your work schedule permits it, would you be available? Are you saying the 19th?
Yeah.
You're available on the 19th?
I can make the 19th.
You can make the 19th, Ms.
That's
Krasinski?
fine.
And Ms. Brewster, you're okay for the
Yes.
19th? Mr. Keeney?
Yeah, do we have a regular meeting on the 20th?
No, it's our next board meeting, it looks like, is the 27th.
27th.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay, so we will set that for 6 o'clock on Wednesday, February 19th.
Gary, can you send out meeting
Yep, I'll
invites?
go
Are you
ahead.
guys available?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, real good. And the next item is Board of Education Committee and Liaison Reports, Buildings and Grounds. Mr. Keeney, can you handle the Buildings and Grounds, since my car broke down and I couldn't make the meeting? I was in Charleston, West Virginia, so.
I'll do the best I can. I'll use Mr. Arlesik's notes. He essentially went through some items that, during the cold spells, they were able to handle things in a fairly efficient manner, no major problems. There were several steam traps that were found when inspecting the buildings that were leaking, and those issues are going to be dealt with when the boilers are shut down for the season. One of the concerns about the univent motors that, is the one that actually, converts the hot water to the heat, it blows it up. The motors and transformers are very old, and parts are extremely hard to get and obsolete. They're trying to reconfigure some of those by wiring bypasses, which means that instead of the units, coming on and coming off as needed, they're going to be hardwired to keep running. So there's going to be some inconvenience there. And this is not a small item, because as time goes on, many of our buildings utilize these types of units. And these units, to be replaced, are really not off-the-shelf items. They have to be specially ordered, and you're looking at a 6 to 9 month waiting period or lead time in order to get these. So as part of our overall, investigation into these buildings, we really have to understand what the complexity of it is, just because of some age. It doesn't mean that things cannot be renovated and brought up to, current standards. It's just looking at our options for doing that and what's the most efficient and cost-effective manner to do that. Maintenance and snow removal contractor kept up with the snow removal demand. There's a bit of a salt shortage, and municipalities have first dibs on getting that before outside contractors get any supply. And our current contractor has approximately 75 tons on hand for our schools, and we're going to use it as sparingly as possible. The heat exchanger at Parkside for one of the boilers we know has been broken for some time, and there's been a lot of back and forth about finding a reasonable solution to that problem. Finally, we got a bid from the initial installer to purchase and replace the heat exchanger, and that'll be later on the agenda. And that cost is $30,914, which is less than originally quoted, but still a substantial price for a boiler that's only 5 years old, maybe going on 6 now. So, the Ohio School Council of Business Managers meeting, Mr. Olesic attended. They had a discussion on insurance rates for various areas of running schools. They talked about, he brought up the subject of bleachers for the high school gym, and how, with insurance, what your requirements are for having those items, and proposed to replace the plastic bleachers with removable aluminum. And more discussion will be handled on that. They also discussed some legislative updates, and with the 15 to 25% insurance increases are probably coming on the way. This is separate from health insurance. This is for other insurance, so everything is just climbing. They also discussed a process that to have the floor plans in the schools digitized and transferred to 3D in order for first responders to bring up floor plans immediately when called, and it could even be translated into a 3D. They could do a walkthrough of the building. We'll get some more information on that to see just what is involved. Core drilling took place a week ago, Thursday and Friday, for the CTE building on campus, and they're currently scheduling the core drilling for the Riverview addition. We're going to get an update on that here early next week. And the CTE building, we had an update on that. Things are moving along well, except with the ground survey that was done, it was found that a 6-inch gas line was running across that grassy area that will have to be dealt with. It's not a big deal, but it's just one of those things that you run into. It was unknown on other plans, and now it's a known item, so it'll just have to be rerouted, and that'll take place during construction sometime. That's all I have for now.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Curriculum and Programming Committee.
Okay. The Curriculum and Programs Committee met on January 27th, and right now they're in the process of planning the Professional Development Day that will be held for staff on February 10th. And they'll be covering and revisiting some of the topics they've covered before, personalized learning, behavior supports, data review, and MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. It's something that the district uses to identify needs of students and to remediate those needs. Staff will be able to choose some offerings while other topics will be required, such as the data review and MTSS. All of these topics address meeting the individual needs of students at school. And there will be no school for students on February 10th as a result. And then tonight we are going to be voting on a selection made for 3rd through 6th grade for a new reading program called Benchmark Advance. 2 programs were tried over the course of the year, and Benchmark Advance was favored. The program incorporates many social studies and science content areas. It also targets skill areas where students need additional instruction, so it was definitely preferred. And the thing that is a little bit different is typically we're looking at 3rd through 5th grade, but we're adding 6th grade because this is a nice transition from elementary into middle school. And, you know we have some 5th graders from Buckeye and Melridge already over at Lamouth, but this continues a reading program that will be beneficial for students. The high school will be hosting more CCP, which is College Credit Plus classes at Riverside. This will allow students to remain at school rather than to have to travel typically to Lakeland. Dr. Malakar also stated that the BAC, that's a Business Capstone Project for seniors, is progressing with plans to offer career electives also down to freshman class as part of personalized learning experience. And a new online guidance tool is creating schedules for students over multiple years, and that's being implemented. What this does is it allows, rather than students waiting to see a guidance counselor or trying to determine their schedule just for 1 year, they can see it over, the course of their time at the high school. And this will afford guidance counselors to have more targeted conversations with students creating their schedules. And then kindergarten camp is being further explored as a way to meet incoming students, or to meet the needs of incoming students and to build relationships prior to starting school. So there's some meetings on that, and that's in development. And then Mrs. Cheryl Lanning gave a special education update. As you will see on the agenda tonight, there are some staff members leaving, particularly educational aid positions, but then staffing is level at this point, even though we're replacing some of them. We will be adding a school psychologist, which will allow better coverage per building to meet the increasing needs of evaluations that need to be completed. It used to be 60 or 90 days, now it's 60 days. I mean, it's just more and more evaluations, and every time a student comes into the district, you're almost having to start all over again. So that puts quite a burden on our current psychologists, some of which share buildings, which makes it hard to really focus on everything that has to be done. So this will afford an opportunity to have better coverage at each building. And they also manage the MTSS process to aid in student learning. So they have their hands full. Right now, our biggest challenge is finding a qualified school psychologist because they are in short supply, but we are inquiring at a variety of colleges and other educational centers. And our next meeting will be held on February 18th at 7:30 a.m.
Thank you, Ms. Brewster.
And as far as the
Sorry?
strategic plan liaison, I know that's also part of my thing.
Yes.
I had a discussion with Dr. Rattino. Did you want to talk about what
You
we
can
want?
go ahead, yeah, that's
Okay, so the strategic plan covers a lot of different areas, but we're gonna take a more academic focus and look at, improvement of student performance, and so we'll be working together on that.
correct.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brewster. Policy Committee, Ms. Krasinski.
We do not have a policy committee meeting, but new policy just came in from Neola, so I'll work with Dr. Tino and Mr. Schlick to get something scheduled. And then Alumni Association, really the big thing coming up is the Riverside High School 75th anniversary and celebration here at Riverside on March 15th from 8 to 11. So
And what's that date?
March 15th.
Thank you for that. Booster Liaison, Ms. Grassi.
So we had a meeting last night of the RPTA. We had representatives from Melridge, Riverview, Parkside, Buckeye. We had Mr. Rattino and Mr. Carabine were also in attendance, and Jen Kalin, who is our PTA representative. We talked about a number of things, one of them being trying to get district administration to post things onto the calendar so that we could have a more community-wide calendar. There's not as much consistency between the schools that some post, some don't. And so that will be further discussion for administrative team when those folks get together and try to help publicize what's going on in our schools and what our PTOs are doing, and that will be helpful. So they've been trying to get the shared calendar. It's just difficult for everybody to wrap themselves on the same page when the PTO members don't have access to school calendars. So there was that. They talked about the egg hunt, which is April 12th from noon to 12:02 p.m., where there will be 12,000 eggs that will be gone in less than 2 minutes. We're looking for some volunteers from the high school to be able to participate and help with assistance and set up on that. Some of the things that we have going on at our schools, so Buckeye has a Sweetheart Dance on February 7th, and they have their skate party on February 27th. AMSCO has a dining night at Raising Cane's, which was rescheduled from a snow-out date in December. That is on February 3rd from 4 to 9. You have to make sure that you mention AMSCO and Maynooth. Melridge has, I crossed this out, but this is actually tomorrow, so they have their second grade pastries and appearance is tomorrow. On February 3rd to February 10th is their Melridge Kindness Week, where they'll be doing a number of initiatives within their own school. On the 28th of February, it's first grade pastries with parents. Parkside has breakfast with the Beaver on February 6th, and on February 28th, they have their glow dance. Riverview has a Dine to Donate night on February 19th at Chick-fil-A. Just, you have to make sure, again, you mention Riverview. And there are a number of other activities that the different schools have to be announced yet. But I just want to make sure that I cover those on a month-by-month basis before we head on to our, to March, so. And then the last thing, I think I will be reaching out to the athletic boosters in the next month so that I can have some conversation with them. I did get a list of all of those folks from Camille. And one other thing that I think our booster groups should be aware of was that with LaMalfa up for sheriff's sale, that some of the organizations that are hosting events there or planning to host events there have been some other venues in the area that have reached out and said that they would be willing to work with them in different groups and be willing to match prices and whatnot. And so if you are interested in that, there's just more information on that forthcoming. Did we list those? Oh, right, Lair in Painesville was one of the centers, and I think Lamouth actually went there last night and toured the facility, and they had posted some of that information on there, and then Regovich at Eastlake had also said that they would be willing to work with people. I think with the sheriff's sale, if they don't get bought, people are kind of unsure of what's going to happen. If they do get purchased, people are still unsure of what's going to happen, you know, whether or not they'll be able to host events, whether or not they'll have staff. So just putting it out there to be on the watch for that. So that's all I have.
Thank you for that. Next, we have the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. Couple of things. First thing, we do have some new clubs, and just wanted to remind everyone of our board policy about use of facilities. Policy 7510 basically says the board believes that school premises should be made available for community organizations and purposes, provided it does not infringe upon the school day. So before and after school, our facilities are open for groups who complete the appropriate use of facility reports. There is a form that fills it out, and there is basically a rank order of how these facilities get booked throughout, but want to make sure that our residents know that our facilities are available for them. Before and after school is something we really want to, again, be the hub of the community and not just the hub of our students in school. Anyone who works with our students under policy 8120 as a volunteer does need a background check. We are working to get a comprehensive background form. We worked with Mr. McIntyre to kind of get the structure of that, and then we do actually run and pay for the background check for those who want to volunteer within our schools, on our field trips and those sorts of things. So working to make sure that we get that through embedded. The final one that kind of came up a little bit was the name and likeness. In September, well, starting in September and moving throughout the months, the board, I'm sorry, I clicked mine and not the. The board, through policy 9211, formally recognizes organizations and gives them formal permission to use the name Riverside Local Schools, as well as the Beaver logo or the cupola likeness as well. Only those organizations that the board is given permission to are approved to use those to identify with any school-sponsored activity or program. So those kind of came up a little bit this month, so I wanted to kind of put some clarity to that. Now the great things that are going on. First of all, we had a district spelling bee. It got rescheduled. It was supposed to be here. It got rescheduled because it was cold. Moved to Lamouth, but we want to congratulate 8th grade Bree Lucas for winning the district spelling bee on Thursday, January 23rd. Bree is going to go on to represent Riverside on February 3rd at Lake Erie College, so good luck, Bree. And I know she's going to do a great job. We did have a number of district spelling bee champions. The way that this works is we bring a grade level champ from each building to this district spelling bee. So each grade has between grades 4 through 8. So want to recognize our 4 through 8 champions as well. They were given I believe it was a certificate or a trophy or a medal, depending on the level for their grade spelling. But our 4th grade champs were Brandon Cartledge from Buckeye, Henry Morse from Melridge, Wyatt Purdoff from Parkside, and Edward Roberts from Riverview. 5th grade champs were William Calhoun from Parkside, Liberty Smith from Riverview, and Lydia Burris from Lamouth. 6th grade champ was Stephen Horvath. 7th grade champ was Amelia Gregg. She was also the runner-up. So she is the front runner for next year's spelling bee and the odds-on betting favorite right now because Bree has aged out. And then we have Bree Lucas again, who is our 8th grade champion overall. This is a super cool thing. We are really excited about it out of our welding class. Our welding, the Cleveland Cavaliers, through the spouse of one of our teachers, reached out to our welding class with a challenge. Basically, they were looking to do one of their group events was they wanted to do a Price is Right prize wheel. They were going to buy one in Las Vegas and have it shipped in. I believe it was to the cost of over $4,000 or something like that. It was really expensive. So the person in charge of the Cavs working was speaking to our teacher, and she said, well, let me reach out to our welding class and see if they'd be interested. Turns out Mr. Blank was, and our students with some help from our technology team, built this Price is Right style, like the Showcase Showdown wheel, which is up there in the middle, in Cavs colors. It was used at one of the Cavs events, and it's a super cool, kind of neat application and process. And just to see them do it is something to really be proud of. It was all built in-house at Riverside and taken out to them. So something we're really proud of.
If they ever need anybody to test the wheel,
I've always wanted
I
to try
will
it too.
volunteer,
Yeah.
because I was actually on the Price is Right, and got to spin the wheel, so that was fun.
Who's Googling it?
Huh? I know, it's like a movie.
Would you like to add what the reward is for that?
For the win?
No, for producing this.
Oh, I'm sorry, they did get tickets. So the Cavs are hosting them at a game as well. So that's what they're excited about. And I believe it's for an internal Cavs, like the back of the house type organizational party that they use the wheel for. So super cool. Preschool registration is coming up. It's time to register the youngest future Beavers. 25-26 school year goes live on Monday, February 10th at 9 a.m. The link's on the registration page. It is online again, and spaces are limited, so current and existing preschool families have the first priority. But we are registering for preschool coming up. Some save the date items. Really neat things happening throughout the Riverside schools. Mrs. Grassi mentioned some by our community groups, but also our own internal groups. Saturday, February 15th is Parents' Night Out. National Honor Society puts on a babysitting venue up here, so drop your young kids off and take your spouse out for a date. It happens to be the day after Valentine's Day. I think Mr. Caravine already has a first reserved spot for his two to drop them off, where he's excited. The 13th of March is the premiere of our spring musical and also Senior Citizen Appreciation Night. So that's when we invite all of our seniors out for a dinner put on by our foods class. And then it will be the premiere of SpongeBob on the Riverside campus. Strongly recommend you be there. There are some guest appearances by not high school students, but old folks who are going to try to dance through it and make it through 4 shows. March 13th through the March 15th is the spring musical. We are doing 4 shows of SpongeBob. There's actually a matinee. As mentioned earlier, March 15th is the 75th anniversary of Riverside. I'll speak a little bit about that more coming up. April 11th is our National Honor Society Spring Carnival, another awesome thing they put on for our younger families. April 12th is the egg hunt, and it literally lasts 2 to 3 minutes. We spend a lot of time setting these eggs out in nice, neat rows, and then it's go, and they all get picked up, put away, and everybody's done. A little bit of tears here and there, but be early. Don't be late, because you'll miss it all. Hopefully it won't snow this year. Last year it snowed, and the eggs were really cold, so we had a little frostbite with the Easter Bunny as well. And finally, April 26th is the National Honor Society Spring Craft Show. They did the Winter Craft Show in the gym. They do a Spring Craft Show as well with local vendors, just to kind of share that. Bittersweet news. Deputy Joe Vasco is accepted a new position with the Lake County Sheriff's Office. Tomorrow will be his last day with Riverside. Deputy Vasco's been here since 2022, and have made some great relationships with our students and families. We do look forward to him moving on. He's actually working for the courts moving forward, but he's been nothing but a great resource to have up here, and we thank him for all of his service. He is not necessarily being replaced, but filling in his spot is Deputy Gurgic. On Monday, we welcome Luke Gurgic, who is going to be our second full-time SRO with Lake County. He will start on Monday. He grew up in Concord Township, did not attend Riverside or Mount. He was a Lake Catholic grad, but he is a lifelong community resident. He also served in the Ohio Army National Guard from 21 to 24 and tours in Jordan and Iraq. He is going to be trained to be the resource officer under Deputy Fitzgerald, kind of get the ropes and all that. So we are excited to welcome him to the Riverside family on Monday. And that does conclude my report. I guess the 75th was in the other. The 75th anniversary of the campus starts at 8:30. Does have a pancake breakfast being put on by the alumni. That we do ask an RSVP for, but then the building will be open, and SpongeBob is at 1 and 7 that night, or 7:30. That concludes my report.
You might, just to be safe, you might want to check what's posted on our website, because it says 8.
Is it 8?
No, the celebration and open house is 8 to 11. There's a pancake breakfast from 8:30 to 9.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I knew I was cooking pancakes at 8:30.
If you're just coming to tour the building or see, you don't have to
Come at 8.
RSVP, but if you want us to guarantee that you can have a pancake or two, we would prefer RSVPs for the breakfast.
Okay, so we have a treasurer's report and committee update. Mr. Platko, are you going to speak now or later?
Mr. Keene's first.
Yeah, so you have something later, so. Okay, Mr. Keeney?
The Finance and Personnel Committee met on January 23rd. Personnel updates, again, typical personnel turnover and postings for new or replacement positions is always ongoing. The HR department is streamlining their operations and moving to digital forms and records rather than paper. This will reduce duplicative tasks, and help will be provided when necessary for applicants filling out forms. Board agenda discussions included various credit card reports and earned rebates, a request for additional legal counsel due to an increased workload related to special education operations, and donations to the district. Donations to the district, which are located in the agenda, are $400 from the Mentor Rotary Club to Riverside Drama, $3,272.16 from the Riverside Campus PTA to the Riverside Campus PTA Closeout Activity Fund, $1,000 from SSC Controls Company to the RAVE program, and 9 Chromebooks from Jeremy Simcoe and National Enterprise Systems were donated to Melridge Elementary School. District staff will attend another AI training session at a cost of $60,000, which will be reimbursed fully by the state. In the CUP report, the Riverside again has the 3rd lowest cost per student in Lake County, with a cost of $14,585 per student. Statewide average is $16,311. I think Gary's going to go over some of these numbers further. Again, with tax valuations, final numbers were presented and the updated numbers will be presented shortly. Health insurance updates. As was previously mentioned, the health insurance is expected to increase 22% through the Lake County Schools Council, an approximately $1.6 million increase annually. Riverside is looking into alternative options to provide health insurance. Costs to the district will still increase, but the percentage of increase may be lower. This will require exploring our operations and ability to find a managing entity to best meet our needs. We talked about state budget and funding, and cuts to education can be expected from the state level and federal level. The effects of the cuts are unknown at this time, and we'll be closely monitoring actions by the legislature. And that's it for that.
Thank you. Treasurer Platko?
Can I just add a few things? Because we spent a good portion of our meeting discussing changes to the board agenda that we'll see going forward, starting in February on the personnel side. Just formatting changes. The content doesn't change, but they want to be able to utilize the information that's going into the board agenda so that they can import that into their contract and into their payroll system. We got some information on what that's going to look like. So again, it's not different information, it will just look different. So when you see your board agenda next month, it will probably look different. That's really going to streamline some information for the people who actually have to enter that data into the payroll system. So that will be helpful for them. And we also got some information at the very end of our meeting about the Joint Committee on Property Taxation Review and Reform, which I think we had mentioned previously last year when I was giving some updates on things that were going down in Columbus with legislative, and they had this committee who was reviewing property taxes, and they were bringing all kinds of people in to discuss with legislators, and they were supposed to provide recommendations, but I think all the things that came out in their report was general overview of kind of just explanations on what happens in property taxes and how they get assessed in some general terms and whatnot, and it wasn't as, I think, as thorough as we had
There's some
expected that would
recommendations,
be.
they're always gonna cover a little bit more.
Yeah,
on how
so-
to update them.
But we did hear that, and we got a copy of some of the recommendations, so we talked about that too.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Treasurer Pfeiffer.
All right, as always, we'll go through our monthly financial reports. So we're looking at December of 2024. As always, reports available online on the treasurer's page and board docs. Our total cash balance at the end of December was $34.9 million. Of that, the general fund's at $21.1 million, with the permanent improvement fund ending at $7.3 million, of which $1.3 million is currently committed. That's with the purchase order issued. There's about $6 million unencumbered at this time. We are 50% through the fiscal year, and the revenue is currently at 46.7%. Expenditures are at 47.1%. The expenditure side will certainly start catching up as the new health insurance rates go into effect for January, so that will certainly, those numbers will come closer together as time moves on. Some general fund statistics. Our revenue for December was $819,000. It's a low revenue month. Typically, that's pretty normal for December, of which $639,000 was our state foundation payments from the state of Ohio. Interest revenue came in at just under $69,000. The Star Ohio interest rate is at 4.6%. Our registry investment accounts at 3.94% for an overall yield of 4.27%. And our expenditures for December came in at about $4.1 million. State budget update, we pretty much kind of went over this already, so the governor's expected to release his budget next week, and then we'll go through the legislative process, and we'll know more as time goes on, but we won't know the final budget until about June 30th of how it will be funded on July 1st. So that's typical how it works every 2 years. And Mr. Keeney mentioned during the finance meeting, we did go through the district profile report, otherwise other known as the CUP report, and just showing those numbers up here. Riverside has the third lowest expenditure per pupil compared to the other districts in Lake County. Madison is typically the lowest, and Fairport and Riverside tend to flip-flop over the years, just depending on the year and circumstances. We're certainly lower than the state average of $16,310. I think that demonstrates that we try to be as efficient as possible with our operations. Another thing that I wanted to share, the report also shows a lot of other figures through, but this one is state revenue per pupil. And you'll see the state average is $7,443 per pupil. We're at $2,970, with only Kirtland being lower than us in Lake County. These numbers do include the homestead rollback reimbursements from the state of Ohio. So it seems like we're getting more than we are based on this list. It's actually, when you look at our actual state funding, it's actually much less than $2,970. We're just looking at the funding formula itself. Interesting enough, Perry's more towards the top on the list because of the power plant, and they get tangible personal property tax reimbursements and other things that makes their figure a lot higher than ours. As expected, like Painesville, Fairport, that's normal for them to be higher than other districts throughout Lake County. All right, next slide here showing our current list of levies in effect. As everyone probably is aware, Lake County went through a 6-year reappraisal going into effect for tax year 2024, which is payable in 2025. It's my understanding the Treasurer's Office has sent out the tax bills, and those should be arriving any day now, if not already, in your mailboxes. Typically, as valuations go up, tax rates go down on a general level. So looking here, we have our inside millage at 4.8 mils. That's the unvoted tax. That millage was set many years ago. That doesn't change as values change, so as values go up, that generates additional revenue. We have 1976 cumulative current expense levies, so that's when House Bill 920 went into effect, so any levies prior to 1976 were all combined into one figure. That's currently collecting at an effective tax rate of 8.66 mils. You have the 1980 levy, currently collecting at 1.61 mils, a 1986 levy at 1.89 mils, and 2017 levy at 3.03 mils, for a total of 20. There's a little bit of rounding error if it's actually as of 1999, but on this, for the state, they round it to 7 decibels, and I'm shortening it, so, but it's, we're at the 20 mil floors. What I'm getting at here, I kind of changed the way I list these, because I took out the substitute levy and now listing it below from 2009. That's currently at 2.9 mils. So our total general fund millage is now at 22.9 mils for tax year 24, payable in 2025. We also have the permanent improvement levy from 2016 at 1.51 mils. That replaced an existing PI levy of 1.89 mils in the past, and then an expiring bond issue from 1994. And then lastly, our phase 1 debt, that's for Parkside and Riverview, is currently collecting at 1.31 mils. So our total millage is at 25.54 mils. Last year was at 30.08, so you can see as values go up, tax rates go down, but once you hit that 20 mil floor on those current expense levies, it doesn't reduce anymore based on current state law. That's something that may change in the future, so we'll keep a close eye on that. How does it look in Lake County? We're the third lowest tax rate, so this chart shows, you know, Perry's at 20 mils, Madison's at 23.8 or 23.83. We're at 25.54. Mentor's at 27.55. This kind of shows where we are. Well, if you include the joint financing district, the Lake County School Financing District levy, which is a joint levy of Perry, Madison, Paynesville, and Riverside, even adding that 1.47 mils that's collecting at, we're still at the third lowest rate in the county. Wickliffe is at the top at 41.08, and they're actually putting a 7.2 mil levy on the May ballot of this year. So, but it was just, you know, that's typically where we've been. A lot of times you'll see Riverside, Madison will be the second, third lowest, depending on who had the last levy. In Perry, they have the power plant there, so they're always typically at the bottom. Next slide here, guys, I have a handout for the board that's a little more easier to read. So each year, as the tax rates come out, the county auditor gives us what's called a Schedule A. It's the county auditor's estimate of tax revenues for that calendar year. And so this chart is kind of showing tax year 2024, what that millage, and class 1, which is residential, what that estimate will be. And then compare that to tax year 23 to see what that increase is. And this is showing it on a per levy basis. So this is kind of just showing how our tax rates dropped from 30.08 down to 25.54 in a little bit more detail. And you can see, if you look on the far right column, the increase in revenue the district receives on a calendar year basis is about 3.67 million on the levies counting towards the 20 mil floor, plus 152,000 for the substitute levy, for a total increase of 3,824,000 is based on the county auditor's estimate. One thing to remember, property taxes are based on calendar year, and we're on a fiscal year, and taxes are also paid in arrears. So tax year 2024 is being paid in calendar year 2025, but it's only half of fiscal year 25 for us, and in the second half of calendar year 2025 is falling into fiscal year 26. So if that doesn't confuse you already, so when you see that increase, it's really receiving about half of it in this fiscal year, and then the full amount actually is realized in the next fiscal year starting in July, which is fiscal year 2026. Looking at the Joint Committee on Property Tax Review and Reform, the final report was released in December. The entire report is 865 pages, which includes all of the testimony that was presented throughout the hearings earlier in the year. It includes a 27-page summary that goes over Ohio's property tax history and laws that are currently in effect. If you ever can't sleep at night, it's a great read. I like to think I have a good understanding of property taxes, and even I had a hard time following some of the information in that, but it really has a lot of history in there, and it's a good resource just to kind of see how things have progressed over the years. The report includes 3 pages of recommendations. There's 21 in total. To be honest, they're not that great. I don't think they're not really reform. They're kind of like, I kind of look at it as like a laundry list of items they can tweak. None of it's really going to make a huge impact in my mind. And even the report even says These recommendations should not be considered as a comprehensive package, and some proposals may contradict others. So I listed a few on the next couple of slides, and probably the first one here, flip the slide over. The Ohio General Assembly should consider expanding the traditional homestead exemption and an enhanced exemption for disabled veterans, including a means-tested increase in the benefit. That one's probably the most impactful one. If they expanded the homestead credit, back when Governor Kasich was in office, there was a reduction to the benefits of the homestead exemption. There was income limits implemented. They're pretty low, so if they expand that, that would actually provide direct relief to taxpayers. And typically in the past, the state has reimbursed us for those amounts. I think there was a proposal at one point to increase those homesteads but not reimburse schools, which, that was in the prior General Assembly. I'm not sure if that's going to come back or what that might look like, but it's something to keep an eye on. Another thing they had in there was the General Assembly should consider increasing the number of public meetings required to be held by a taxing authority prior to levying a tax to promote transparency to taxpayers. It already takes 2 meetings of action to put a levy on the ballot, and in most cases, we're already discussing that months, if not a year, more in advance. So I just thought that was interesting that they want, I don't know if they're going to come yell at us, we're going to put a levy on the ballot. I don't know if that's what the intent is, but this seems like it's just adding more redundancy, because most boards would be discussing these things well in advance of actually taking action. Another one on here was to consider authorizing property tax circuit breaker as proposed in Senate Bill 271 and other bills pending before the General Assembly. That was based on last biennium budget. As you know, at the end of the year, at the end of December, everything dies. So all these, Senate Bill 271 doesn't exist anymore because it didn't go into law. So I'm not sure we reintroduced, but that was a way of offering a credit to certain taxpayers if their property taxes exceed a certain percentage of their household income or something like that. I don't really know the details off the top of my head, but I'll be watching to see if that gets reintroduced going forward. A couple other ones, I'm not going to go through all 27, but one of them is this, adopting a property tax deferral program. That's not really reform. If you just delay your tax payments, at some point you're going to have to pay them anyway. Simplifying the process of levying and collecting property taxes. Okay, that doesn't really give us any detail on what that would be. I mean, it is a very complicated system. The next one, the General Assembly should consider requiring that emergency and substitute levies be included in the 20 mil floor. So that one could be impactful depending if they implement that and how they implement that. I did some calculations, and if that was in law that would include the substitute levies prior to the reappraisal that just happened, we'd still be at the 20 mil floor. There'd be many districts that are still there. It was kind of curious that they didn't talk about adjusting the floor in the report. They just included that recommendation, didn't say anything about eliminating or lowering or what that might look like. None of that was in the report. It was just including it in that. And then the other one was consider reducing the maximum term and renewal options for emergency, substitute, and continuous levies. If you're reducing a term of a continuous levy, it's not continuous anymore. Emergency levies were not renewable when they were first introduced in the early 1970s, and the General Assembly made them renewable at some point, I think in either the late 70s or early 80s, and now they're talking, no, maybe we should not be doing that. And the other thing is, emergency levies aren't really defined of what an emergency is. Basically, the law says for emergency purposes or to avoid an operating deficit, so it doesn't really define that. Even public schools don't like the wording emergency levy because it doesn't really, you think of a typical emergency of what you would define it as, the law doesn't really define what that is. So that concluded my typical update. The next item on our agenda was to kind of talk about our cash balance reserve policy. Mr. Bush and I had some discussions about this, and we wanted to kind of have some discussions because in accordance with board policy 6234, the cash balance reserve policy, and based on the November 2024 5-year forecast, the Treasurer, CFO, Superintendent, and Board of Education will discuss options to return the general fund cash reserve balance to the required level, which is 90 true cash days. And these options may include, but not limited to, pursuing tax levies or other sources of increased revenue, management of school district finances, implementation of reductions in force, and implementation of cost-saving measures. And the board shall take appropriate actions at least 2 fiscal years prior to the fiscal year in which the general fund cash balance true date target cannot be met. So if you remember back from our November forecast update, we were trending to that point of now we're 2 fiscal years ahead of where that minimum cash balance will not be met, even with the reappraisal going into effect. So this slide shows, this is from the November 5-year forecast, showing our cash balance policy, our current cash balance is 3 years of actual data, and our estimate for this current fiscal year at 2025, we're looking at 146-day cash balance, which is a good cash balance to have, but you can see that is starting to decline. For 2026, we're looking at 114 days, and 2027 is at 66, which is below that 90 threshold. So looking at some action steps, we're going to start on the expense side of things first. As we receive resignations and retirements, Dr. Rutino and Mallory and I will review those positions and ensure that do we fill those positions, do we eliminate those positions as those vacancies occur. Just making sure that we're being as efficient as possible going forward. Only filling positions if they're needed or justified. The state teacher retirement system also changed the eligibility requirements for retirement. They reduced that, it used to be 35, they reduced it to 34, and now it's at 33 for the next 3 years. So we're expecting additional retirements that would result in savings, because typically someone who's later in their career are higher on the salary schedule than someone who's earlier in their career. So hopefully that will result in some savings. This monitoring our enrollment trends and class sizes. A key point to make is that we do not have any reductions in force that we're anticipating at this time or being considered. As you saw earlier with the CUP report and our expenditure per pupil, I think that shows that we're running pretty efficiently, and there's not really fat in the budget to cut it, I would say. Probably not the best terminology to use, but it's not like we're overstaffed at this time. On the benefit side, as we already talked about, the Lake County School Council and what's going on with health insurance. We created this committee here. We're looking at what our options are going forward. But as for the Lake County Schools Council perspective, I am one of the seats on the 5-person executive board. It's a rotation of school districts over the years, and we've been making some action steps to try to help reduce our claims going forward. One example is they've eliminated coverage for GLP-1 medication if it's being used exclusively for weight loss purposes. You can still get GLP-1s if it's for diabetes, like your Ozempic, Wegovy, those type of medications. But if you're using it solely for weight loss medication, it's no longer be covered. But the consortium is also implementing a weight loss program that can be utilized by those individuals that are being phased off those medications. There's another program, what's it called, Save on SP or something. It's basically a program. If you're on a specialty medication, you're required to sign up to use these coupons that will give the consortium a rebate. Obviously, you don't want people on those high-cost medications, but you can't stop certain ones. And those ones, making sure that they're getting that rebate back from the manufacturer will help go back in the consortium and save some funds. It doesn't cost the employee anything. It's just an additional action step on their behalf. And then we've met with a new consultant just to explore what our options are, doing a market check to see how our rates compare to similar districts, and then looking at, do we leave the consortium at some point, go on our own, self-insured, what plan design changes could look like, or do we looking at the high deductible plan with the health savings account. So looking at all those different things, obviously these are, compensation related, so we have to work with our unions as well as we explore these options to see what they look like. Now on to the revenue side, looking at property tax levies. Our last operating levy was approved by the voters in May of 2017. Typically in the state of Ohio, 3 to 5 years is the typical cycle for an operating levy. We're currently at year 7, heading into year 8. Kind of looking at if we were to go a property tax levy route, looking at November of 26 election, which would collect in 2027. So if the district were to put that on the ballot in 2026 November, we collect those funds beginning the first half of calendar year 2027, which is the second half of fiscal year 27, going into fiscal year 28. There's basically 2 main types of levies that are mostly used: the current expense levy Those can be up to 5 years or continuous. That would, if we were to go that route and that was approved by the voters, it would raise us off the 20-mil floor, and there'd be no growth from valuation increases if we're off the floor. An emergency levy, on the other hand, can be up to 10 years but cannot be continuous. That would keep us on the 20-mil floor, which would result in growth from valuation increases. And that emergency levy could be substituted in the future into a substitute levy and made continuous, or just made a regular 5 or 10-year cycle and collect money from new construction. So those are options that we have available to us at this time. And just seeing what, on the next slide here, what is a property tax levy would generate. Our current assessed valuation is $1,727,000,000. So what that means is 1 mil generates 1.7 million, 2 mils 3.4, 3 mils 5.1. So you can see 1 through 5 there on the slides and what those generate. If you remember earlier, our typical levies are between the 4 and 4.9 mil range is what we typically have put on the ballot in the past.
And so what would you be projecting based on?
I have not done the true projections yet, but it would probably be between we'd probably be looking at the 4 to 5 mil range.
Maybe a little more than 5?
It is possible, so it kind of depends. We got a lot going on the state budget and with the reappraisal and everything else, so we'll continue to monitor that. We're really early in the process at this point, so it's just things to consider. The next slide is looking at income tax. We've never done an income tax before, but it is an option to school districts. There are 2 types of income taxes. One's a traditional income tax based on your modified adjusted gross income, or an earned income tax, which is based on employee compensation and net earnings. So that an earned income tax would basically exclude seniors on fixed incomes on Social Security or on pension income. Those would be excluded from income tax if we were to go that route. As of January of 2024, last year, 212 districts in the state of Ohio levy an income tax. They can be imposed for any length of time or continuous. And then the rate of that would have to be in increments of 0.25%, 0.25%.
And just to be clear on that, when you say imposed, there's no vote?
No, you have to vote for it. If the voters have to approve it.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, so it's
Yes.
not imposed?
Correct. Correct. I think I actually pulled it from another presentation that I saw recently, and that's...
That's how it's worded.
Yeah, how it's worded. But yeah, all those have to be voted on.
Right.
You can't just impose it. It has to be voted on. It's different than municipal income tax. It's only subject to residents and estates, so it's not paid by businesses and non-residents. Something to just keep in mind that residents in Grand River and in the city of Painesville, so that'd be like your Heisley Park and Liberty Green neighborhoods, they're already subject to a municipal income tax on income. Next little point, no effect on the 20 mil floor. So because it's not a property tax levy, we'd still be at the floor if we were to go this route. And an income tax revenue would increase as salaries go up with inflation. Salaries typically tend to increase, so that would be continued growth in an income tax levy. And then taxes are distributed quarterly to the district in July, October, January, and April, so that would be a cash flow thing. We'll be getting cash flow at different times throughout the year. So I reached out to the Ohio Department of Taxation, and they gave me some estimates, which I'll hand out the actual chart they gave me, which is quite extensive. I kind of simplified it for the slides. And so if the district were to impose a traditional income tax at 0.25%, it would raise $4.5 million a year. At 0.5%, it would be $9.4 million. If the board decides we want to move forward with more of an earned income tax, which would be more beneficial for those on fixed incomes, because that would be subject to those people on Social Security and those things. 0.5% would be at $6.8 million a year, or 0.75% at 10.2. So just kind of want to show those projections of what that could look like, and kind of my recommendations going forward. We'll continue to manage our expenses as we spoke earlier. monitor our property tax collections. Our first half settlement for 2025 will come in late March, early April, to see how those actually come in compared to our projections. Will there be more delinquencies or non-payers, what that could look like. Obviously, closely monitor the state budget, which gets finalized around June 30th. We'll update our 5-year forecast as required, and have probably additional discussions in the future, with probably more of a discussion in July or August, once we know more of where our collections came in, where the state budget came in, and how our fiscal year 25 results ended, and what we look like going into 2026. At this point, any questions, discussions, information you want me to try to find, put together for future?
The amount, the net revenue from the property revaluation, you're saying is 3.8 million?
It's about 3.8 based on the auditor's estimates.
And is he still estimating, or is that actual?
That was the estimate that was provided on that Schedule A, so the actual will know when actually people pay the bills, basically.
Well, yeah, it could fluctuate a little bit, but that's basically it.
Yeah.
When you were doing your projections, I know that there were discussions about a wide range, even all the way down to 2.6, right? But most of your projections were based around 3.0, right?
I think it was around 3 to 3.2. I have to go back to verify. One of the things we don't know is, will there be any delinquencies? Typically in a calendar year, you get about 52% of your taxes in that first half, and 48% in the second half, because some people prepay their taxes for the year. Will that change because of the increase? Now, some taxpayers saw decreases. It kind of depends on your individual circumstances, what taxing districts you're in. I know there's, Concord Township, or, have a new fire levy, but there are taxpayers who actually saw a decrease even with the new levy, just based on how their house's value increased compared to others in the area. So sometimes there's a little bit of shift depending on individual parcels.
So when you look at an approximate $600,000 to $800,000 difference, when you're projecting out when we will need to put a levy out for an operating levy, how many mills, what portion of a mill would that be? 600,000, 800,000?
It would be
approximately
about a third of a mil.
Third of a mill.
Yeah. I think remember it was 1.7 million or so what one mill would generate, so that'd be about a third, 600,000. Then you have to look at the timing of when you go on the ballot too. Like 2026 is when you go into an even number year, 2026 is governor election year, so you have a primary and you have the November election. Those elections, we don't pay an election cost on that to be on the ballot. In odd number years we do. So, going on the ballot in May of 26 and November of 26 are really the same thing in terms of when we collect funds in 2027. If you go in November of 26 and then if you're unsuccessful or pushed to 2027, there'll be an election cost to go on in May of 27. And then also, odd number November years are board election years, and I'm not sure if the board would want to have an election and a levy on the ballot at the same time.
So the election costs, what, plus or minus 35,000?
I think it's more closer to 50.
50?
But I can verify.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on how many entities are on the ballot too, because they kind of spread that cost. If you're only thing on the ballot, your cost is going to be higher than if we're on the ballot and Painesville Township's on the ballot or something like that, that cost gets divvied up.
Right, because it gets split up. So interesting that when you start getting squeezed and you need some money, you need to put up about 50,000 to ask for it.
Yeah.
Works out well for them.
And they take it out of your property tax settlements, so
Yeah.
it's not like you cut a check per se, but it's still real money. It's still an
Yeah.
expense that's incurred, but it's not necessarily you have to take it out of your pocket today. But that's just how they collect it.
And what now, hey, let's hope this never happens, but what if it never passes? Do they just never collect that fee?
They still take it out of your property
Your
tax limit.
cash flow, okay.
So it's still
Yeah.
you still pay for that whether it passes.
Yeah.
Do we pay a fee? We pay the fee for tax collection
There is.
and the
yes.
remittance, right? And I don't believe that this Department of Taxation imposes a fee for tax collection and remittance when you're looking at an income tax. I don't think they do.
Yeah, I have to look into that, you know, this is, you know, income tax is a little bit newer to me, I've not had experience
Last
with it
time
in
I
the past,
remember
but-
looking at reports, I do not think there was a fee involved, so.
Yeah, it's administered by the Ohio Department of Taxation too, so.
So, you know, when we were going over some of the financials, not this subject, but the monthly, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, now we have true numbers, because at first we thought that there was some discussion about not being on the 20 mil floor. That's not the case. We are on the 20 mil floor. But this difference of between $600,000 and $800,000, that represents a third of a mil. We realize that, you know, we're in deficit spending. I'm just looking at as I discussed with you, the PR standpoint, that a lot of residents are waiting to get this tax bill. They've already looked online. They know they're going to get like $1,000 more a year. You're right, it may be a combination of things. It may be not only the reevaluation of their property, but it might also be that, let's say you live in Concord and they passed a safety levy. So I get that, and people will be getting this. I guess my concern is, you know, obviously all this money is going into general fund. None of this money, this new tax valuation money, is going to be diverted into some repairs with the critical needs we have in some of the buildings. And then we're gonna be put in a position to ask people for even more money for general fund again. And then down the road, when we do get money for, let's say, the casement TIF, that will go into general fund too. So there's nothing ever feeding the permanent improvement levy except the $2.5 million we get. And yet we have aging buildings and critical needs that need to be addressed. And that's just a concern I want to put out on the table.
So what would be your suggestion for that? If we're talking with the public and the public is saying, you're asking us for more money and that money's going into the general fund, and a very high percentage of that, what are we, 82, 85% goes to salaries and benefits?
Probably closer to 80.
81,
yeah.
So when we look at those numbers and the public asks us, okay, what are you doing with the $98 million report of the buildings? Our kids are going into the buildings, they're not in good repair, and all the money that you're asking us is going to go basically to salaries and benefits. And I know you buy paper and bus fuel and that sort of thing, so you have some percentage there. What would your suggestion be, or do you have a suggestion to take a portion of that money and appropriate it towards doing some building repair so that we can tell people we're actually taking some of their tax money and doing building repair?
Yeah, so it'd be different if we weren't deficit spending, but because we're deficit spending, even with the appraisal, we're still deficit spending based on, you know, that large health insurance increase. You know, we talked about the property, you know, property insurance is probably going to increase, those things of things. You know, typically our revenues are pretty static over the years. We don't see a lot of increases. We don't see a lot of increases in state funding. And you look at just what inflation has been these last few years, you know, we've all experienced it, not just as a district, but also individually. We're not, you know, schools aren't immune from that. And so our costs continue to rise as well. You know, on the flip side, if you're deficit spending, you know you're going to need money in the future, and you take that money and you're spending it on facilities as well, that's only going to expedite your deficit spending, and they need to go on the ballot sooner. So, you know, with the reappraisal, it's helping us extend our levy cycle and you know, support our day-to-day operations. You know, we're not a district that's declining enrollment. You know, if we were a district like Mentor or Willoughby's, like with declining enrollment, we could make reductions, and you know, there's probably, you know, it's kind of always staggered. As your enrollment goes down, at one point do you reduce positions? But our enrollment's been pretty flat, so we don't have that ability to really reduce positions. And I think that the CUP report with the expenditure per pupil rating and showing that we're the third lowest in Lake County kind of really shows we're lower than the state average. We're lower than the Lake average in Lake County. We're stretching our dollars as much as we can. So that would be kind of my take on it.
So when we say we were planning on 3.0 to 3.2 and we're getting 3.8, the answer is still that would change if we took 300,000 and put it towards building repairs, that would change the time when we would need to go for a levy?
Well, everything always compounds too, so it's, there's a lot of moving parts to it. Now, I'll give it 300,000 is a relatively small, we're a $50+ million budget.
We're at what, about 55 this year?
50, yeah, something like that. So it's, while it might be a small piece of our budget, we tend to try to maximize it best we can.
So, again, what I hear from people, and it's a concern, what are you guys doing with the buildings? And especially after the engineer's report came out, there's a little bit more awareness. And so when the kids are being sent to school, the concern is, okay, sending the kids to schools that might not be getting the attention they need on the upkeep side. And so when we ask people for more money to operate, what can we tell them about how we're going to be taking care of the buildings?
And we do have a continuous permanent improvement fund that we can make improvements with. Now, we are spending a lot of money on these expansions as well. So
right, so we're underspaced right now. And that underspaced situation requires we create space or put more kids in trailers. I mean, what are the options, right? And we've had kids in trailers for, what, 17 years? And, we had parents talking out very clearly and loudly that they didn't like the trailers. And so now we're fixing that, but when you're looking at getting $2.7, $2.8 million in the permanent improvement continuous levy, that doesn't go away because it's continuous, right? So we can at least rely on that and count on that. The options, we don't have very many options because, and I know I've said this many times, we have a lot more needs than we do money to satisfy those needs. And of course, everyone wants their item taken care of, right? I mean, that's how it goes. And so, that being said, the question is, do we need to tell people 0% of what we're doing, or at least 0% of the increase of what we projected would go to that, or can we tell them we'll do 30% of the increase, something? I mean, something. It's. I know you said we've had this discussion, right, and about what percentage of the operating levies pass or fail, and you were saying it was about a third that pass, right?
Yeah, about the state average, around
State
3%.
average. Yeah, and so it's a tough pull already, and if the public views us not using but what they perceive to be any of the money to help with the building, sure, we have the PI, but we're looking right now at leveraging that 2.7 that we get into $19 million worth of work, approximately. And I know that number will be refined, but it's going to be somewhere around that number. And that's not bad, taking 2.7 and getting 19 out of it. But that's kind of where the magic ends. And so, and then some of that money, of course, is payments on what we would be borrowing to do that. And we'd be a little bit more limited on how much we can put into the building. So I'm just looking at a possible plan that you might have that we might be able to tell people this is what we plan on, what's recommended by the treasurer to do general upkeep and improvements on the buildings. Let's just say, for example, in this building right here, I know that when I became a board member, I went through the building and I talked with some teachers, and teachers are using 2x4s to keep the windows open because they're not functional anymore. They don't close all the way. The heat just goes right outside in the winter, and we're losing that, and and even in the boardroom, when you look at the windows, most of them don't even seat. You can see an airspace. And then in the summer, when it's 85 degrees and humid, and there's some teachers, because they don't have screens, don't want to open the windows, the kids are sitting in there just miserable. It's hard to learn. It's hard to teach. And what do we continue to tell people? We're going to continue to do that, or we're actually going to have a program to start to maybe replace windows and do some other things.
So can I ask a question, because I thought I read in your Friday packet that we were going to be talking with our municipal advisors coming up shortly to review financing options for Riverview Buckeye. Can we just roll this conversation into that without pinpointing we're going to move money from the general fund yet? I'd like to know from our municipal advisor folks, like what our financing options are, how much we can raise from those kinds of things before we start taking money from the general fund. We already have a budget for repairs and maintenance and general operating and facilities in our general fund. I don't know that I want to commit to saying we're going to move X dollars out of the general fund when our MO for the past many years has been, let's see how long we can make those levies last. If we're going to borrow funds and we're going to have those folks come in here and give us some presentation of information on what we can raise through financing off of dollars that we are collecting from the PI, I would like to hear that first.
And with the unknown with the state budget, if they really do implement cuts to our funding, that could be, I mean, if we commit funds away already to something else, and then we find out we're gonna lose $300,000 a year, who knows what that might, it's anybody's guess at this point, that could get us in a bad spot.
Yeah, you do have the variables of, the state budget, that, the staffing piece you discussed earlier, the health insurance costs, trying to bring costs down there. And, it's just hard because we all know, even in our personal budgets, that things never seem to get less expensive. They just keep getting more. And it's hard to save anything, save that kind of money.
Right, if we're saving into a negative, we're fighting against ourselves. Now, we don't want to be irresponsible, but we're already in deficit spending, and saving as much to try and have 0.25% less deficit spending and neglect other needs, is that really fruitful or even wise? And so as we look at using our advisor and looking at what the cost of money to borrow is, there are always options as to what you can look at and what the money is going to be used for. Probably when you're borrowing money, you need to know what you're borrowing it for. And if you start to look at what are other possibilities, if I want to go put windows in my house and I go to borrow money and I say, well, I'd like to get heating and air conditioning and carpeting and inside the house also, well, that's going to obviously make the number different. And was that in my plan? Well, not necessarily in the plan, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Then we're not being organized, we're not planning properly, and then we're going to use assets that we might need for something else. And in the future, I think that we're pretty well sure as a district, as we go out several years, probably 5, probably 6 years, we're going to have some more needs, and in those needs, you can think about and project out what the cost might be. But if you just use a general $20 million number for future needs, then you have to have some availability in that PI. And if you exhaust that availability, you tie your hands and you're not able to do those things you need in the future. So I'm not so sure we want to tie our hands at this point. We're looking at smaller dollars, and again, we're looking at, we were expecting to get 3 to 3.2, and we're getting 3.8, and we're still saying we're in deficit spending. We want all that money to go into the general fund and nothing for the buildings. I'm just saying it's a difficult explanation to the public, asking them to give us more money. And then when they give us more money, we say, well, that's going in the general fund, and we're still gonna ignore the buildings, because that's our MO. So what kind of plan could you put forward to say, if an operating levy is passed, what percentage of that money would then be appropriated toward building maintenance and upkeep?
And see, that's something that we can have further discussions on. We can structure it different ways, because there are, you know, I went over the basic options that we have. You know, we can make it a combined levy with operating or in a PI. We could make it just an operating and say we're gonna, you know, if this, because first of all, you know, if it's a new levy being proposed, if it doesn't pass, now we have, you know, really hard issues and really trying to figure out what we need to do going forward. With a new levy, you could also say, you know, whether it's an income tax or property tax, and say, you know, we're gonna ask the voters for this, but we're gonna commit this much money from that to whoever that is. So, for example, if we were to pursue the income tax and we do a 0.5% or 0.75%, say, okay, if voters say yes, we're gonna transfer this much money from that to capital projects, we can do something like that. The issue you have is if you take money now, because, you know, it's not money in our pocket until it's in our pocket. So this is all based on estimates and what's, you know, if we start committing too soon of taking money away from it and we don't realize those monies, or something else happens to the state budget or some other thing comes up, you know, then we've asked the voters for a levy and they say no. The opposite argument could be true as well, as saying, well, maybe you shouldn't take that money out of your operations, you should have used it for operations.
I think it's just like, it's like the state budget, though. You can't tie the hands of a future board. They're not required to continue on in any plan that this board would vote on. They can change their mind at any time when you have different people sitting at the table. So committing future boards to set aside dollars for X, Y, or Z, I mean, unless it's documented and it's a levy or you're paying a bond or whatever, you're not required to follow that. So
Are you saying seriously that you believe board members would not make the payments on a bond such
That's
that
not
that
what I said.
district
I
could
said-
never borrow
I'm
again?
not saying, I said, other than a bond, okay, when you have a bond, you're committed to paying those dollars. What I'm saying is if we, 5 members as a board, said, oh, let's pass an income tax, for example, and we're gonna set aside 50% of those dollars for facility improvements, a board next year could decide they don't wanna do that. They could collect the income tax is imposed. There's no stipulation on the income tax when you put it on the ballot that you're going to use it for a specific purpose. Unless like a PI levy or a bond levy actually states what you can use it for. We have a bond levy, we have to use it to pay for facility and construction, and we have to physically list out what we're going to do with it. But operating levies aren't like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, but I think any responsible board member would not want to take that approach.
Well, I don't know, a board member that sits at the table next year might not have the same ideas. I have no idea who will sit at this table next year.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So if anyone is responsible, you would hope that people that are elected officials would be responsible. But even a bond, like Mr. Purcell said, even a bond doesn't have to be paid. The board could choose not to pay it.
If it's a voted bond, the county auditors are collect what we make our payments.
But I mean,
So-
borrowed bond, right?
We do a cop.
The board could actually not pay it.
Correct.
And that happened, what, in Twinsburg?
I think it was one time, yeah.
Yeah. And so what that pretty much guaranteed was they're never going to be able to borrow money again on the market. That's so irresponsible. And I know this is a little bit different, but it's the same premise. So in utilizing our monies as best we can, if we pass if the people vote to pass an operating levy, and we have money in our general operating account, the same argument could be made that if we take a portion of that and use it for building maintenance, that we're going to have to ask for money sooner. That's the same argument. I mean, that's a fact, right? I mean, if we appropriate money out of the general operating fund and we spend it on building maintenance, that will quicken the time when we have to go back to the people and ask for more money. So that argument is continuous no matter where you are.
So if you want, if you
So
want
when we're telling the people, we have an extra $600,000 to $800,000, and we're not willing to take $300,000 and do building maintenance with it, what message does that give? And I understand what you're saying. If you don't pass a levy, you're looking at cuts, right? We're looking at serious cuts, and this district's been there before. And so what's the best message to the public? We're spending every dollar as effectively and efficiently as possible, or we're just gonna try and rack up as much money as we can and forget about the buildings, and because we want that money to last as long as possible, but it's still not gonna change the time when we come to you and ask for an operating levy. I'm having a difficult time reconciling that. It's not gonna change when we go to the people for an operating levy. That date won't change, based on that small amount of
if
money.
you want to commit money to improvements and capital improvements, then pass a PI levy, because then it's designated for that, and you can't spend it on a general operating.
Well, that could be a black and white issue, and certainly that's another approach, and now you're talking about yet another levy.
Well-
See, the people have just been taxed without a vote, and people aren't happy. I think we all know that. Anyone that's been talking about it is not happy. And so if we go for an operating levy and then a PI levy on top of that, that's not gonna work. So we have to have a good vision, we have to have good planning, we have to execute, we have to measure, and we have to report to the people what we're doing. Now, we're doing a little bit more public awareness. We are doing planning to alleviate the space shortage that we have. We're taking action to get kids out of trailers. So we're quite active in what we're doing to fix the problems. But now we're starting to squeeze a few $100,000 of money we weren't expecting to get, and still saying we want to protect that money and not address the $98 million report. Now, it's not $98 million anymore, because some work's been done. The vestibules and different things have cut into that amount of money, but certainly it's still in the 80 millions. And so even further, some of the work we're going to be doing, like over at Buckeye, that will knock some of that down a little bit too. So we're making progress in some ways, incrementally. My opinion, this is one board person's opinion, my opinion is we should be making a little bit more progress if we can. And I'm hearing you're not recommending that, but the logic of it isn't really settling in, because it's not going to change the date, the time when we have to go to the public and ask for operating money. And while this is a very circular conversation, comes back, and again, it's my opinion, if we're unable to tell the people we're taking care of the buildings with any of the money that is there, especially extra money we weren't expecting to get, I'm not confident that we have as good a chance of passing an operating levy. That's what I'm saying. That's my one person's opinion.
So I'm just going to go back and say, I think, as I've said before, I believe we've kind of put the cart before the horse sort of thing, and we've put out plans to fix our facilities and do projects, and we haven't really talked about the funding options yet. And if we want to have that be part of our funding option, then I think we need to have that conversation, but we need to see some data, and we don't have the municipal advisor data. And so without having all of it all at the same time, I don't feel like we can make an informed decision based on a full slate of information.
So I think that we're talking about two different things, because if we're talking about borrowing money to address the
I'm not
engineers.
necessarily talking about just borrowing money. I'm talking about a plan of how to pay. It may include borrowing, it may include taking money from general fund, it may include many options, but we haven't talked about what that plan looks like.
So now we're into some different items, and we're getting a little bit off of focus, because those are generalized statements, and certainly you can have a plan. And are you suggesting we should ask the administration to give us some different options along those
I
ideas?
think we should have had that conversation before we decided to move forward with
Okay,
facility
again, now
additions.
we're
Yes.
going sideways, it's not
I'm
productive.
not going sideways. Yes,
So-
that should have happened a long time ago,
Okay, and how long ago would you say?
before we decided we were going to vote and add on to Riverview. Like, we should have had those conversations. How are we going to fund this? We haven't had those conversations at this table in depth. We have not had that conversation.
So have you brought any possibilities?
Have you?
Yes. we're paying cash for the Riverview, okay? We will be
Well-
borrowing money from the PI. We will be utilizing those dollars as effectively and efficiently as possible, squeezing every ounce of value out of those dollars.
Did
To
we
go,
ask,
to
did
go
we
ahead
get,
and
did we
fund,
get
and,
options
excuse me, I'm
for
speaking.
financing?
To go ahead and execute the Buckeye work and some other work attached to that. So yes, there is a definite thought and plan in place, and those have been my suggestions. And so the board voted on those things and is moving forward on that. So we as a board have discussed those items. Now, we have not gotten as comprehensive at what you're talking about, and I would suggest you bring a couple ideas of plans to the table that would address those items. I think that would be a great idea, to have more
I think I just did.
input.
I think I asked for our municipal advisors and our administrative team to come up with funding options so that we can afford to pay for all of the things that we have decided that we are moving forward with already, plus anything else that we decide at the table that we would like to include in that plan. I think we have to have a plan. If we're gonna sit and we're gonna revise the facility plan and we're gonna talk about even doing more things that we haven't had that conversation yet, we should be talking about funding all at the same time.
Right, so item number 15, Board of Education business under financing and improvements, does talk about a resolution to go down that road. So we're already going to be seeking, I don't want to.
We're asking the treasurer to do his job.
Yeah,
So
it's there.
So, again, it comes back to how are we going to utilize the dollars and get every ounce of value out of it for the taxpayers of the district? Because the taxpayers are giving us their hard-earned money to operate the district. And how best do we do that? It's my suggestion, it's not best in doing that in keeping kids in trailers. Say, we're acting on eliminating that problem. It's not best on taking away the music room and special ed rooms to create classrooms and not have enough space like over at Riverview. So we are fixing that problem. Now, we are in a pretty bad spot based on a move that was made 4 years ago. Now, obviously, Mr. Keeney wasn't here, Ms. Brewster wasn't here, I wasn't here, when a 16 classroom school that would take $18 million to replace today was sold for $500,000. That's a $17.5 million loss to the district. That was huge, and that has put us in this situation. Now we're spending the money to fix that problem, and it's a big problem, okay? And when you lose the benefit, the value of $17.5 million, who would do that, by the way? So when you lose the value of $17.5 million, you have to have $17.5 million to overcome that. And so we're going to be spending just under $20 million to try and fix some problems. Now, that still leaves the rest of the problem, the $98 million engineers report. So this is a very circular conversation, and I know there's a lot of different ideas, but it comes down to we're only talking about a few $100,000. And what I'm hearing here at the table is there's not a suggestion that we could use a few $100,000 for the buildings, that it needs to stay in the general account, right? That's the thought.
I wouldn't necessarily put it that way, but because we're deficit spending, I don't think it's wise to take money out from the operations. We already have a designated revenue stream for improvements. And, we haven't even collected those funds, so what the actual estimate, what the actual collection will come in at is yet to be seen.
So, okay, so we're back where we started from. So I just think that it lessens our chance, the opportunity, the chance of people saying, okay, we're going to pass an operating levy, but we're not confident it's going to be used for buildings. So I think it's a poor message. So it's just, that's my opinion.
So, being a person who's ran two levy committees, I can tell you that people, when they see buildings, brick and mortar going up, their first question to us is going to be, why are you putting brick and mortar up if you can't pay to run your school? Our job is to educate children, and in order to do that, we have to have personnel to do that. So I disagree with you. I think it's actually quite the opposite, because when they see that brick and mortar growing up, they're going to be like, you can put up new buildings, you don't need money to operate. And you can talk to Willoughby East, like they actually went through that.
right? So that's why the communication with the public and explaining to them that the operating account, general account is different from the permanent improvement levy that they are already paying taxes on. Those are two separate accounts.
Right, but you're asking
And
to take
if
money
people,
from the
excuse me,
operating
let me
levy.
finish, and if people are with the belief that all that is one tranche of money, then yes, they could have that misunderstanding. That's why I think it's important to explain to the people how their dollars are being used, and that is a totally separate avenue, the bricks and mortar that are going up with the money they are already paying us, and that the salaries and benefits is a totally different account. So, I mean,
You
we
know,
talked
Mr.
about
Fischel, I
that in
would
the
love
previous
to-
board meeting.
I think that you're actually listening to what we're saying, but everything we say you disagree with instead of considering it. I've ran 2 levies. I think Belinda has ran levies. There's other people you can talk to that have ran levies, and it doesn't necessarily work the way you're describing. We have described to the public how the money operates. Mr. Placco has given many discussions on how the money operates. People don't understand it. They see what they see. They see brick and mortar going up, and now we're asking them for money to pay our teachers. They don't want to see that. They're going to say you can put up buildings like Willoughby Eastlake did, but you can't pay to run them. They don't want to hear that. So again, you can have your opinion. I will have my opinion. But I think you got to be open to consider what some other people are saying that have actually done the work to get levies passed.
Well, I'm definitely hearing you and open to those thoughts and considerations. And what I'm hearing you say is when there's been failures in the past, what my opinion is when there's been failures in the past, you need to try a different way and not go down that same path. So if you do, you know, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So let's find a new way to communicate with the people, to educate the community, and have them be with us rather than view us as asking them for money and not with them. I think we want to create a team effect. And I think part of that, a big part of that, is communicating with all of the taxpayers. Now, right now, Nick, when we send out emails to the district, it mostly goes to the parents of the students, right?
Mhm.
And we know that that's a smaller percentage of the voting public. So now we have the rest of the voting public, which is by a wide margin, a majority, that we're not reaching in those communications. And so I think we need to find a way to reach all of those people and start to convey to them what the plans are, and can we have a collaboration and a teamwork approach rather than the taxpayers viewing the schools, as you said in Willoughby Eastlake, going to them and asking for more money. It's like 2 different teams. I think we need to be working together with the community, and I think it's going to be very important
The problem is it's not
to
a
create
collaboration.
a communication process with them.
So I know that when we passed our bond levy for our facilities, the community voted to approve the bond levy. And part of that plan, and the community agreed, was to decommission 4 schools. I just want to make that clear to the public, that it wasn't something that was an afterthought. It was part of the plan. We were going to build 2 schools to replace 4. I just want to remind this board of that fact.
So then, after that was done,
And the community approved it.
yeah, and after that was done, what was the next planned step?
The next planned step was to continue with the process, and the sale of those facilities was used to pay for facility build.
But there was a phase
That's what it
2
was.
of a plan that was approved by the community, and that was to build a high school complex. That was the next step. So there was a full plan on 3 steps of how we were going to improve the district buildings, so.
And so when that went down, if the community approved that, why did they vote 76%
I'm sorry.
against it?
It doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't matter.
Well, sure
Like,
it does.
Those schools were already gone.
Well, sure it does, because if that was the plan, the future plan and the vision, and that failed, what was the backup plan to that?
Well, heck, you came back and put another facilities plan together that you did not listen to on what the public wanted to do, and you did your plan. I've counted it. You've said my plan, our plan, we plan, like my plan, like so many times. There's no collaboration here. So that's the problem with the communications. It's your plan. It's your communication. It's not ours. And you're not listening to what other people are saying that could help make things better. So when you sit up here and say we have to have a team environment, that's not going to happen because you don't want to work with the team. Again, you have people with experience and they can help, but you ignore that and you're going to do my plan, my plan. This was not part of my plan. This is how I plan to fund it. That's what the things I've been hearing throughout this entire meeting. We can go back and count it.
Yeah.
So until you want to work as a team, that teamwork is not gonna happen.
Yeah, so I think we do have teamwork right now getting things done. We have a Riverview addition going on to solve the lack of space. Okay, that was a team board vote. So when an individual says they have an idea that they're putting forth and they say, this is my idea, my plan, of course, it has to be voted on by the board. And so that's teamwork. So everyone has their idea. It's I or my plan, I or my idea, and you put it forth, okay? And the only way that that gets anywhere is if there's a majority vote on the board. That's the only way it happens. What I'm saying is when you go back to building Riverview and Parkside, and you had a plan to do that, and that was executed well, what was the follow-up plan for there, okay? And you said the community supported the facilities plan, the capital plan to go ahead and build a new high school, but then it got voted down by 76%. So to me, the public never approved that.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay?
I think, do you have any other comments?
I know you would like to move on, but these are facts that are uncomfortable, and we sit
They're not
here.
uncomfortable.
Yes, the community,
we
the
sit
community
here-
voted down a levy because you campaigned very hard against it.
I
Let's
was
just face it.
responsible
I
for
mean,
76% of the people voting
Oh my
no.
God,
Let's just
forget
say
it.
Okay?
It's just,
Okay,
it's circle.
so again,
matter.
teamwork, are you willing to work with the team to find a way forward so that we can take care of the buildings, because they've been neglected for a
And
long
yes,
time?
so I'm saying, yes, I am absolutely willing to do that, and I think that's what item 15, if Mrs. Brewster was correct, that's what item 15 asks, and that is what I alluded to. Can we ask for a finance plan to be brought together instead of saying, right now, we'd like to divert funds from our general fund? Can we see what a plan looks like? You're asking for us to vote on an agenda item that directs our treasurer, right, to do his job, like, basically, in a nutshell. Let's allow that to happen before we make decisions.
So we certainly are doing that, and our treasurer is certainly giving an opinion on how to utilize the money. Okay, and we are hearing that and discussing it. We're discussing it at the board table.
We haven't heard it yet because it's not complete. We haven't heard from our municipal advisors yet. We haven't seen a plan.
Yeah, so Gary, do you have a meeting planned with our municipal advisor to address our capital needs and how we would utilize money to solve our capital needs?
We've already had a meeting a couple weeks ago with our bond council to start the process of doing the certificate of participation that we discussed at the December meeting. I know the bond council, which is our legal council that works on these type of borrowings, they're starting to put some information together. There's some title work that has to be done on the Buckeye property and survey type of things that have to occur, and some of that legal stuff. So we've already started those discussions.
And how, have we discussed at the table how much money that's going to raise, if we're going to put in additional funds? Like, do we have the full fiscal plan to pay?
And that's the thing, we have general estimates of what these different improvements are going to cost.
We don't know what they're gonna cost yet.
But until we get a true estimate from the construction manager, once we have something designed or close to being designed, we'll get a true, more formal estimate so we can know and make sure that things are coming in where they're at. Because my fear is if things come in much higher and, we value engineering things back down to something else, or we make changes to those improvements, that's another challenge. So we have to kind of figure out, make sure that we're exactly where we need to be on the things that we're going to be building.
So what you're talking about, though, is the Buckeye project. Nothing additional outside of the Buckeye project for capital needs on the engineer's report.
Well, it depends on.
No, because I was in that conversation, and we talked specifically about the Buckeye project.
Right, we did talk about the Buckeye.
We didn't talk about the engineer's report and other monies that would be utilized for elsewhere, which Ms. Grassi
And maybe we should be.
is alluding to, okay? And so we're talking about different things here, okay? We're already moving forward with board-approved items. And that's what we're talking about, is talking with the bond council to acquire the money that we think will be needed for the project. And now we're introducing different items. And if you introduce different items, certainly a lot of things are going to change. But we haven't talked with our bond council about additional items, have we?
I don't know, you
No, but
seem
my
to have talked
concern
about
is more-
additional items when you sent out a letter to the community saying we were talking about additional items, so we could just go back to start there. I'm not, like, I think we just need to move on.
Yeah, I think you might be confused about what we're
I don't
doing.
think I'm confused.
But the idea of the meeting, because I was in the meeting, okay? And we're talking about funding the Buckeye project. We're not talking about additional needs according to the engineer's report. And we're not looking at what the possibilities of that are. And we don't have a scheduled meeting with our bond council to even address that or plan for it. So if you would like to meet with the bond council and have them give some ideas as to how we could or should handle the engineer's report and those needs, certainly open to having suggestions and or a report in that regard, but we don't have any planned meetings for that right now, do we?
What I was gonna say is my concern is more on the already approved projects that are underway with Riverview and the Career Tech Edition. If those come in over budget when the bids come in, and we don't have enough money to pay cash for those, how do we handle that? So that's more my concern, that snowballs into the Buckeye
Right,
project.
and so, but the PI fund, as we get into another fiscal year and paying cash for the Riverview, right now it's looking at approximately $5 million, $325,000 to the architect, which makes it a $5.3 million project. And we have $6 million right now in the account, right? That's unencumbered.
Right.
Right. And so even if that came in 20% higher, we would still, according to our picture today, be able to handle that. But by the time we're finishing that project, we're into another fiscal year, right?
Which you have the funds to sign the contract for the guarantee.
I understand that, but we would be into another fiscal year if we had overruns.
Correct, but
Right.
if the bids come in beforehand, when we get our GMP amendments, what it's called.
Right, right.
The bids, if it comes in much higher than we have available, we'll have to look at borrowing options to get us to the next fiscal year. 'Cause we
Right,
can't serve
and that's part of the reason why in estimating the cost, we used the higher number of $500 a square foot instead of $450, okay? And so I think that we've covered ourselves a little bit, and there's always a concern. I mean, if the price came in 40% higher than what we thought, then certainly we have a problem. And so does everyone else, because that means everything's out of whack. So I'm not so sure that's reasonable. And what I'm trying to express here is we are definitely focused on getting things done, okay? And if we are looking at possibilities, a number of different possibilities as to how to do other repairs and improvements, certainly that can be on the table for discussion, but we don't have any planned meetings for that right now. That's what I'm asking, right? We don't have any planned meetings for that at this time.
Not at this time.
Right. And so, Ms. Grassi, if you'd like to request a planned meeting for that and have our bond council try to give us some ideas as to how to utilize the money for repairs needed in the district, certainly you can request that.
I'm not
And-
going to
and we can
request
get
that
that.
at this time. I'm just asking that we actually get some cost data. We need to get cost data. We need to figure out how we're paying for what we've already decided, what we're going to pay for. And if we are having a work session to revise the facility plan, I think we need to be talking about funding at the same time.
Yeah, I think those are 2 and 3 different items.
Well,
and
then
so
it's
we'll-
2 or 3 different
We'll
items.
address that as we move forward, and we have a work session scheduled. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public participation. Anyone wishing to address the Board of Education will be recognized by the board president. Speakers are requested to speak from the podium, identify themselves and their topic. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone for public speaking?
My name is Cynthia Mahoney. I'm a
I'm
district
sorry,
resident.
could you repeat that?
Cynthia Mahoney. I am a district resident, a parent of 2 alumni, and I am your district registrar. I just wanted to address something that's been brought up in 2 meetings now about Haddon, and something that was actually spoken about here at this table. We had a district plan, and it was presented to the district. It was presented to the community. The community came together. We decided to move forward. Part of that was decommissioning Haddon. I served on the committee that actually designed both Parkside and Riverside. So I have been a part of it. I sat in all the meetings, and there was a specific plan to move forward. And twice you have said that it was a bad idea that we got rid of Haddon. I quite literally closed Haddon down. I was
I'm
the
sorry, you did.
I quite literally closed Haddon down. I was the secretary of Haddon at the time. And I do know that there was a plan in place and that you keep talking about team and that you talk about coming together. And the thing that is upsetting to me is that there was a plan in place and it was voted on by the board. And as a team, as you say, we should move forward. When we got to the stage to start phase 2, it was decided by the board, by majority, that this was going to go to the public. So based on what you have just said tonight, you should have been part of that team that worked with the board and the community so that we could actually follow through on a plan that was in place. So I just feel at this time it needed to be said that they did what was asked of them. And to tell them that they did something wrong is not fair. And if you want to work as a team, then you need to lead by example. So I just ask that you give that courtesy to the people that are sitting at the board that have expertise, that have experience, to our administration who also have expertise and have very valuable input on this situation, and listen to them as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda for finance and audit.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the items listed A through G in the consent agenda as recommended by the treasurer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Would you take the poll, please?
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Aye.
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel.
Aye. Next item is consent agenda personnel.
Read through the agenda, there's a lot going on there. I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through H. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Aye.
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next,
If I could just take a moment to
Yes.
thank those who are retiring for all their
Yes,
service. And
yes,
we will
please.
celebrate them later, but, you know, it's a lot to reach that age of retirement, so those who are retiring, did want to make mention and just say thank you to them.
Thank you.
so noted. Thank you. Okay, next item is consent agenda curriculum.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the items listed A through E on the curriculum and programming consent agenda as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Mr. Placco, will you please call the roll?
Linda Grassi,
Aye.
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster.
Aye.
Next item is consent agenda buildings and grounds. And make a motion to approve the items listed on buildings and grounds operations consent agenda as recommended by the superintendent. Item A. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Mr. Placco, can you call the roll?
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next item is item on the, under buildings and grounds, the TDA Buckeye Elementary School Expansion and Improvement Project. Resolution to approve an agreement from Venn Design Architecture, TDA, for design services related to the Buckeye Elementary School Expansion and Improvement Project plus MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements at Melridge Elementary School in the amount of $785,000. Make a motion to approve the resolution. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So this includes mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements at Melridge Elementary School, which we have not discussed. Just putting that out there.
We don't really have any dollar amounts on anything yet because we really haven't decided what is going to be involved. We are starting this process, and you know, things are always in flux going down the line, but we're going to make note that we are going to address Melridge as much as we can, but you know, both of these buildings are going to require a bit of study and thought and discussion to decide just how they're going to play out in the future. They're both critical buildings to our mission, and they need to be upgraded.
So we're voting to approve an agreement with Then Design for design services for things we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah, you're kind of looking at the chicken and the egg because you can wait to approve every single step along the way when some of those steps have to be developed and even have to be investigated, gathering information as to what they even are. So I'm hearing you and understand what you're saying, and I can appreciate that. But yes, we do need to vote on this so we can move forward.
So let's vote on it. I'm just
and-
saying, I
and-
believe we're doing things, we're asking them to do things that this board has not even had a conversation on.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Gary, can you call the roll, please?
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Nay.
Lori Kniske.
Nay.
Motion carried. The next item under Buildings and Grounds is Construction Manager at Risk Contract, Buckeye Expansion. The Riverside Local School District Board of Education hereby approves the attached agreement between Cleveland Construction Incorporated and the Riverside Local School District Board of Education for Cleveland Construction Incorporated to serve as the construction manager at risk for the Buckeye Elementary School expansion and improvement project, and hereby authorizes the board president and treasurer CFO to sign this agreement on behalf of the Board of Education. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Gary, can you call the roll?
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Nay.
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item under Buildings and Grounds is Owner's Representative Contract. Resolution to approve an amendment to a consultant agreement for owner representative services with RFC Contracting LLC for various projects to extend the agreement through August 31st, 2027 at a revised monthly rate of $14,000 effective March 1, 2025 through August 31, 2027. I make a motion to approve this resolution. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Gary, can you call the roll?
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi,
Nay.
Lori Kniske,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney.
Aye.
Motion carried. The next item is a policy agenda. Ms. Krasinski.
It's just the first reading, so it's first reading of 3 new policies. Nothing to vote on.
Okay, thank you for that. And next is Board of Education Business, financing for improvements. Resolution authorizing the treasurer, CFO, to work with the district's bond counsel and municipal advisor to secure an underwriter and secure financing for the Buckeye Elementary expansion project and other improvements. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Well,
Denise Brewster, second. Any discussion?
So we're asking for us to work with a bond and municipal advisor, bond counsel, or lawyers and municipal advisor to secure an underwriter and also to secure financing. Are we not going to vote on the financing separately?
There would have to be a board vote in the future when we actually get to the actual financing. So it's more preparing for a financing.
But
There'll
will they-
have to be another vote before we
We're
actually.
we're
Well,
gathering more information on
Yeah.
this, right?
and there'll be options to discuss and,
Right.
Is there a reason why we need to have a resolution on the agenda to ask you to do this?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to know why we need a board agenda in order to ask Gary to do this, because this is.
We're
part of
looking
the
at the
job.
possibility of spending money, and we're moving in that direction, so we want to approve our treasurer, CFO, to move in that direction, gather the information we need, and of course, there wouldn't be a board vote until we know exactly what the details are, and those details will be developed through conversations and through our bond counsel and his advisement. Would you
So
say that's
again, I don't
accurate?
think I can, like, this board agenda item isn't written in a manner in which I can vote affirmative.
I think it's also missing Riverview. We still don't have the cost for any of this work, so I think we have to be exploring options for Riverview too. So I don't even think it's complete. So,
Is there any further discussion? Gary, can you call the roll?
Linda Grassi,
Nay.
Lori Kniske,
nay.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Keeney,
Aye.
Denise Brewster.
aye.
Motion carried. The next item is a work session. I know Ms. Grassi, you had a number of items in the Board of Education handbook to go over, and so at this time, we can go through those item by item if you would like.
I have no desire to go through them item by item. If you would like to go through them item by item, you may do so. The board handbook was updated to include definitions of committees.
So would you prefer to have that on an agenda at another, next board meeting to vote on it, on those
Vote on it
changes?
and not vote on it. Well, you can have a vote on it.
It's not on the agenda to be voted on today. Would you like to have that on an agenda in the future to be voted on, your changes?
Ure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll,
It was on an agenda last, but we took it off.
Yeah,
Because
I-
you wanted to have a work session.
right, so we wanted to go through them, because I offered to you at that time in the last meeting, we could vote on it then, and you said you'd prefer to go through the items.
No, you said you prefer to go through the
Okay, and I
items.
offered that you could have a vote right there,
So let's have a.
and you said no. And it's not on the agenda for a vote right now.
Then we won't have a
So
vote
we
on it.
will put it on a future, on the next board meeting for a vote, the changes in the handbook. So right now, we are past the work session, and we're into the next
Yeah,
meeting.
I just wanted
I'm
to
sorry,
say-
go ahead.
Yeah, because I went through all these changes, there's quite a bit in
Well,
certain
if we're not gonna,
parts.
if we're not gonna vote on it now, can we?
I
talk
guess
about it
I
when we're
just
going
wanted
vote
to
on it?
have the opportunity to have board discussion, and more than, many times tonight, we're talking about not having enough board discussion, so I'm a little confused.
And I do have questions about some
Yeah,
things in
we're-
here before I
we're
can
new.
vote. So.
We could do it at the table, I could also set up a meeting with you.
I'm sorry?
We could do this at the table, either tonight as part of this meeting, or we can also, I can also.
Well,
I
Ms.
can-
Grassi's saying she doesn't want to do
I
it.
can set up a meeting to kind of answer.
Shouldn't make any difference what I want to do.
Well, there's just some things I don't agree with at all, and there's some things I may like to see changes. So, I don't know how we handle
If
that.
you want to
I
send this.
think we
out,
actually sent this out to the entire board with the recommendation that any items
So,
for
Mr.
discussion or
Keeney,
question were presented
We
to
will put
Mr.
it on the
Rotino.
agenda to just vote up or down on it,
Okay.
all of the changes, because that's what's at the table right now.
No, nobody had any changes that they had directed to Dr. Rotino, and so if you would like to do that, I would suggest, again, direct your questions so that they can be addressed.
Okay, so we're past the work session item, and it-
I do have a question for
Okay.
Dan, I'm sorry. Can we make, is it okay to make some of like the demographic, like the name changes, board member changes without a vote? Is that?
So
like,
yeah, technical corrections.
Technical corrections we can make? Okay. So I will go ahead and update some of those.
certainly,
Okay.
as should be, from time to time. right?
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that was.
So thank you, Dan, for that. And, okay, so the next meeting announcement, Gary, the Buildings and Grounds is February 3rd, is that correct?
Yes. February
February 3rd at 8 a.m., curriculum and programming, February 18th at 7:30 a.m., Finance and Personnel Committee, February 20th at 8 a.m., Board of Education meeting, February 27th at 6 p.m., and we also have scheduled a work session for,
I think it was February 19th, was it?
yes, Wednesday, February 19th at 6 p.m. Okay? And so with that, I make a motion to adjourn at 8:54. I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. And Gary, can you take the roll?
Lori Knudski,
Aye.
Scott Fishel,
Aye.
Dennis Kenny,
Aye.
Denise Brewster,
Aye.
Linda Grassi.
I
Motion carried. See you all next time. Have a great evening.